Chapter 2397, Master of the Segmentum. Yi Futian's reply silenced the space again. He had actually refused a request from Princess Dongwang, declining to follow the princess to the imperial palace. It's finished! In the area surrounding Ziwei Imperial Palace, those cultivators from the Divine Prefecture thought there would be no doubt about the impending conflict. Yi Futian's refusal implied that he may indeed have other secrets, and that the Imperial Palace would have no choice but to take action against him. Sure enough, several cultivators stepped out from behind Princess Dongwang. One of them had a frightening aura. They were surrounded by divine light, and it was none other than Diyu, the Spear Emperor. He was one of the direct disciples of Dongwang the Great, and Yi Futian had seen him in action before. He was exceptionally powerful. Buzz! A godly spear appeared in his hand, puffing out a terrifying light, as he floated towards the temple where Yi Futian was. Clearly, in the eyes of those from the Imperial Palace, Yi Futian's refusal was equivalent to a crime against the princess. Princess Dongwang said nothing. She seemed to be silently condoning the Spear Emperor's action. Behind her, a group of people floated forward, and all of them were releasing a powerful aura, oppressing the Ziwei Imperial Palace. Yi Futian had the support of the cultivators from the Devil World behind him. If they were to join in, a battle would be inevitable. Yuxing took a step forward, and the cultivators from the Devil World followed suit. But the eyes of old demon Tunshin sharpened. The Devil World had no right to meddle in the matter at hand. To confront the Imperial Palace of Divine Prefecture, in the land of the original realm no less, would be both disadvantageous and foolish. This was really an internal matter within the Divine Prefecture. Apprehend him and take him away. Anyone who dares to interfere with the business of the Imperial Palace will be killed without exceptions. A cold voice came out of a cultivator from the Imperial Palace. The person's aura was beyond horrifying, and he was someone that Yi Futian had never seen before. He was a supreme cultivator who had survived the second divine tribulation of Great Path, a peak existence closest to the level of the Great Emperor. Boom! A wave of demonic might erupted from Yuxing as dark demonic currents tossed and howled. Dark demonic eyes swept towards Princess Dongwang. Whoever dares touch him today will have to answer to me. As long as I live, anyone who touches him will die, Yuxing proclaimed. His statement was a cause of concern for the cultivators from the Divine Prefecture. They frowned but did not stop what they were doing. Rays of divine light showered down to envelop the temple below. This sight was so familiar, Yi Futian felt like he had seen it all before. This time, it was finally his turn. Was his fate the same as the Snow Ape Emperor or as his teacher, Mr. Du? Battle to the death, or be taken away as a prisoner? Yu Sheng, stand down! What Yi Futian said took Yuxing by surprise. He turned around to look at Yi Futian. The demonic might roared upon him. Stand down! Yi Futian looked at him, and repeated himself calmly. If there were to be a fight, he'd rather let it just be him. There was no need to involve Yuxing. Here. Unless Dongwang the Great comes in person, it won't be easy to take me away, Yi Futian said matter-of-factly. Yuxing watched him and was silent for a few moments, then withdrew. The cultivators from the Devil World were still guarding close by. For cultivators from the Devil World, whether Yi Futian lived or died was not their concern. Besides, they would really like to see the abilities of Yuxing's brother. After Yuxing and the others backed away, the light of the matrix above the temple lit up suddenly. Then, beams of divine light rushed into the sky, and high above the boundless sky. The scenery seemed to change as if it were being fast-forwarded. The clouds and winds were morphing and surging, akin to changes of nature. The sun and the moon moved in rapid succession, and with a single thought, night had fallen. Above the firmament, a starry sky world came into being. Countless stars were shining like countless pairs of eyes. The starlight fell as if this was the real world, the real Ziwei Segmentum. Starlight fell upon Yi Futian, making his long silvery hair appear even more luminous as he bathed in the divine light, standing quietly under the stars. I have never done any evil deeds to the Divine Prefecture, and I have always defended the original realm. I will not hesitate to fight for the original realm. So, if your Royal Highness still insists on taking me away against my will, I will have no choice but to resist, said Yi Futian. Watching this exchange, people who were closest to the Heavenly Mandate Academy and to Yi Futian felt an immense sorrow in their hearts. Did it all come down to this? They knew very well what would ensue following Yi Futian's resistance and his declaration of war with the Imperial Palace. This would push the situation to the point of no return. Those principalities from the Divine Prefecture held grudges against Yi Futian. They smirked silently. This was no more than Yi Futian seeking his own death. If there were ever a chance for him to get out of this mess, he had completely squandered it by now. He was courting death. Above the firmament, the Spear Emperor, Du, and other cultivators from the Imperial Palace focused their attention on Yi Futian, who was below. Divine lights shone brightly upon them and yielded terribly sharp auras. The aura that hovered above the long spear in Du's hands was even more appalling. He looked at Yi Futian with a slight pity in his eyes. Did this worm actually think that he could shake the tree? Did Yi Futian really want to go to war with the Imperial Palace? He took a step forward, and the long spear in his hand pierced straight down. Instantaneously, a long spear pierced through heaven and earth, descending from the void all the way down, slaughtering towards Yi Futian. It was as if this strike would traverse the void and take Yi Futian down. Buzz! However, at this moment, the boundless starlight above the void sprinkled down, and those lights fell directly in front of Yi Futian, where they turned into a starry light screen. The Spear Emperor's long spear arrived and blasted right on the light screen, which blocked the attack. The light screen was so brilliant that it shut out all the attacks, ones that came from a peak Renhuang. Yi Futian continued to stand there quietly and didn't move a muscle. It was as if he had absolute confidence in himself. An exceedingly horrific aura came down from the sky, causing the Spear Emperor to look slightly concerned. The starlight had illuminated the entire Ziwei segmentum. He looked up at the firmament and saw that there was a heavenly might that was descending. The countless stars seemed to have transformed into a massive and boundless face, the face of a deity. Ziwei the Great. This is the Starry Cultivation Court. All the cultivators from Divine Prefecture looked up into the sky as if the world had now coincided with the world of the Starry Cultivation Court. They looked quite surprised. Could it be that the entire Ziwei segmentum was now shrouded by the will of the Great Emperor? The Starry Sky World was the Ziwei segmentum. Yi Futian had inherited the will of Ziwei the Great and gained control over the Starry Sky World. He was able to awaken the will of Ziwei the Great, causing the change to occur in heaven and on earth as the heavenly bodies shifted. In Ziwei's segmentum, Yi Futian was its true master. Buzz! At this moment, a star above the sky lit up with horrific starlight. It was aimed directly at the Spear Emperor, Du. Du's face altered a bit when he saw the extremely bright star release terrible starlight, heading right at him. It was an imperial star. He raised the long spear in his hand and stepped into the void. As the long spear pierced forward, it spat out infinite divine light to counter the light that had descended from the starry sky. When the two beams of light collided, the spear will was obliterated. That terrifying aura eradicated everything in its path as it continued down. The Spear Emperor was repelled by it. His body was knocked straight into the air. Boom! His body fell hard on the ground, creating an opening in the ground. Du's body was nowhere to be found because it had been blasted deep into the ground. Chapter 2398 Fangru. What was happening shocked everyone watching. Yi Futian had leveraged the power of the starry sky to fight, and all the stars in the heavens seemed to be under his direct command. The will of the Great Emperor was his will. Yi Futian had inherited the will of Ziwei the Great in the Starry Cultivation Court back then, and had completely integrated with the will of the Great Emperor. The Spear Emperor, Du, and the Divine General of Divine Prefecture Imperial Palace were blasted beneath the ground by the starlight summoned by Yi Futian, who didn't even move. Under this segmentum, it seemed that he was the master of this universe, and no one could usurp his authority. This is crazy, many thought. In the distance, people from the top principalities in the Divine Prefecture were watching in awe. In one direction, where the cultivators from Donghua Domain Chief's manor had congregated, Ning Yuan's eyes swept through the space and zoomed in on Yi Futian. For him to have declared war on the imperial palace, Yi Futian had now burned many bridges and dug his own grave. So what if he was in charge of this segmentum? The entity in front of him was no longer just the top power of the divine prefecture but the principality that dominated and ruled all of the divine prefecture. The will of Ziwei the Great might be strong, but he was a fallen great emperor, after all. Now, only Dongwang the Great was the ruler of all of the divine prefecture. Those divine generals in the void were brilliant with divine lights shining on their bodies, and a terrifying aura descended. Those sharp gazes were directed at Yi Futian, but they made no move against him. Du had been suppressed by a single blow, and they didn't think they would fare any better than him. The same fate would probably befall them as well. In this world, perhaps only the cultivators at the very top had the ability to deal with Yi Futian. The people from the Heavenly Mandate Academy didn't feel elated when they saw the sight before them. On the contrary, they felt a sense of profound sorrow. Gu Donglu had been cultivating and improving his cultivation in the Starry Cultivation Court in the days past, but he was still powerless when faced with today's situation. Once upon a time, their teacher Mr. Du had been taken away in this manner. Now, facing these principalities of the divine prefecture, his junior brother had the power to battle them, and he was bold enough to resist. This was nothing less than open defiance against the authority of the gods. If their teacher had known that their little junior brother had progressed to this stage, he would probably be incredibly pleased. The imperial palace, on the other hand, would probably put an end to this. And when he thought about that, he couldn't help but felt a deep sadness. Once, he had thought that they would have victory over all of their opponents, no matter who they were, as long as they were given the luxury of time. But what about the likes of Dongwang the Great? There was only desperation now. No matter how long they were given, they could only revere that which was the legend of the world. Your Royal Highness, I don't want to fight, but it seems that I don't have a choice. Yi Futian levitated above the temple and said to Princess Dongwang, "Whatever happens today, no matter the outcome, I am responsible for my actions. I hope that it will not affect anybody else." Very well. Princess Dongwang looked at Yi Futian's and agreed to his request. Thank you very much. Yi Futian nodded slightly. Hearing what Yi Futian had to say, the cultivators from Ziwei Imperial Palace and the Heavenly Mandate Academy sighed. If something were to happen to Yi Futian, could Ziwei Imperial Palace and the Heavenly Mandate Academy be able to survive in this troubled world? Today's world was in utter chaos. With all these worlds upon them, there was no telling how many of them had set their eyes on the Starry Cultivation Court in Ziwei Imperial Palace. Once Yi Futian was no more, the alliance between the Heavenly Mandate Academy, Ziwei Segmentum, and the Lost Clan would very likely disintegrate as well. Then, it would spell nothing but pure disaster for all of them. These several great forces could connect and remain stable in these troubled times because Yi Futian had played a decisive role. Take him! Princess Dongwang spat with immeasurable coldness. Immediately behind her, several extremely powerful beings stepped forward. The auras upon them were quite astonishing. With all the worlds coming, the forces representing the divine prefecture were also much more substantial this time. After all, the original realm was part of the divine prefecture. Yi Futian perceived those horrific auras and wondered, how many powerful characters like these were there inside the imperial palace of the divine prefecture? A ray of light illuminated Yi Futian, and in the next moment, his figure disappeared from right where he was standing. Many looked up in the sky and saw Yi Futian's figure appeared above the firmament. He seemed to have integrated into the starry sky world as an unparalleled figure appeared behind him. It was the phantom of Ziwei the Great. The authority of heaven descended, and the horror in the atmosphere reached the peak as the coercion now overwhelmed the entire Ziwei segmentum. At this moment, in the Ziwei segmentum, as well as the many starry worlds, countless creatures raised their heads to look into the firmament. They had felt that heavenly might, and with a tremendous shock. They were wondering, what was happening? Your Royal Highness, let me reiterate that I have no intention of fighting with the Imperial Palace. However, if the princess refuses to let the matter go, I would fight using the starry sky. Your Royal Highness should know that the previous princess of Ziwei Imperial Palace perished under the starry sky. Above the firmament, a voice was heard, full of a supreme godly might. Once, the previous palace lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace had intended on seizing the will of the great emperor, and had been killed on the spot by Yi Futian, using the will of the great emperor. Afterward, Yi Futian inherited the position as the palace lord of the Imperial Palace. This event was witnessed by many cultivators in the Divine Prefecture. The Imperial Palace should have heard something about that as well. If Yi Futian could fight by leveraging the will of Ziwei the Great, the strength he exerted would be the same as it was then. Perhaps, under the prowess of a great emperor, no one would be able to compete with him. No wonder Yi Futian was so confident that he asked Yu Xing and the others to stand down. Under this starry sky, unless it was Dongwang the Great himself who was here, Yi Futian had no fear of anyone. Under the starry sky, the cultivators from the Imperial Palace were a little hesitant. They did not expect that in the land of the original realm, they would be hindered by a Renhuang of the seventh realm. At this time, a man who had been standing there quietly now walked out from behind Princess Dongwang. He was wearing a cape with a hood on his head, and now he took off the hood as he raised his head slightly to look up into the space high above. It was a middle-aged man who looked to be no more than 40. He had an elegant and scholarly temperament. There did not seem to be any aggression from him. Instead, he appeared aloof and detached. Previously, he stood quietly behind the princess just like everybody else from the Divine Prefecture, inconspicuous and easily looked over. But the moment he walked out and stood under the starry sky, everyone could feel the exceptional temperament about him. He stood there as if he was the master of this world. Who is he? Many Renhuang from Divine Prefecture did not recognize this man, but some top figures in the other worlds had made out who this elegant and erudite person was. They were amazed that he was the one who had been protecting Princess Dongwang. Behind Yu Xing, old demon Tunshin saw the middle-aged man and whispered, "Fang Ru." This was a contemporaneous existence of his, in an era when even Dongwang the Great was an unknown. Who is he? Yu Xing asked old demon Tunshin, clearly feeling the importance of the man from the expression in old demon Tunshin's eyes. Thousands of years would have taken his cultivation to the peak just below the great emperor. He is an existence known to have the most probability of impacting the imperial realm. Now that many years had passed, he is probably infinitely closer to that realm except for the shackle of the heavenly path. Old demon Tunshin explained. Chapter 2399, Peak Beneath the Emperor. Yi Futian surveyed the area below and saw Fang Ru drift upwards. In the sky high above, he stood there quietly, surrounded by divine light. A brilliant image radiated outward from his location. It was a splendid vista, a scaled-down version of a much larger world. Vision of the world! Everyone raised their heads to look around Fang Ru. The vision that appeared was an entity all on its own. The power of the surrounding heaven and earth poured into it with insanity. It was as if the vision of the world was a world of a higher degree that could borrow the power of the great path from the outside world and integrate it into this tiny world to be used. Fang Ru stood there quietly, unbelievably tranquil. Just by standing there casually, it was clear that all the power from the heavens was under his control as if he was the master of this universe. It seems that Fang Ru has already been exploring that kind of realm. His splendid vista is now become more developed, forming a world of its own. The rules inside of it have already surpassed the rules of the great path on the outside world. Some top cultivators marveled silently as they witnessed the sight. Fang Ru was a powerful existence who had achieved his fame millenniums ago. For countless years, he must have been pursuing and exploring that supreme realm, seeking a breakthrough, hindered only by the shackles of heavenly path. Presumably, the two had struck a deal for him to follow Dongwang the Great willingly. Perhaps, Dongwang the Great had agreed to give him some guidance here and there. Otherwise, as a supreme existence, Fang Ru did not need to condescend to protect the daughter of Dongwang the Great. Except for pursuing the most supreme realm of them all, someone like Fang Ru did not need to ask for anything else, much less obey someone else and act the role of a glorified guard. unless it was the temptation of breaking through that realm that caused his change of heart. Would you like to create your own rules of the world? How difficult is it to break the shackles of the heavenly path? How can a person even begin to embark on that legendary road? Many people had the same questions, especially those who had already survived the divine tribulation of the great path. They were full of curiosity and anticipation. For those at that realm, there weren't many things that could interest them enough to become an actual passion. They could clearly feel that Fang Ru might have taken a small step forward already. He stood there, and the world around him seemed to be at his disposal. Above the firmament, Futian perceived Fang Ru's mighty strength. This may be the strongest existence he had seen so far, other than the teacher, whose true strength was still a mystery. However, Fang Ru, as he stood in front of him, gave him a sensation that was entirely different from the others. It was tremendously powerful. But at this time, he was no longer himself in the common sense of the word. In the Ziwei segmentum, he was its de facto master. He, whose will could be matched with the will of Ziwei the Great, had all the stars in the heavens at his command. Or one could say that within this starry sky, he was someone akin to a god. At this moment, he saw that Fang Ru had made a move below, and he was coming towards the starry sky. Suddenly this vast world seemed to be shaken because of him. Futian glanced at the area below, and his thoughts shifted. Suddenly, a supreme coercion came from the sky, surrounded by the stars. When Fang Ru was on his way up, all these stars emitted the most brilliant starlight. It came down upon Fang Ru at the same time. It was a stunning sight when countless starlight began to fall at the same time, every starlight containing the might of the way. Buzz! The starlight illuminated the area where Fang Ru was, but it was blocked from the outside. The imagery of the vista around Fang Ru was like a true scaled-down world. When the starlight fell, it failed to penetrate that world, unable to break through its defense. What was even more frightening was that all the power of the heavens seemed to be guarding surround Fang Ru, resonating with the world he created. His speed was so fast that it approached the limits of what was possible. It was hard to detect with the naked eye as he rushed directly above the firmament. The cultivators below could no longer see any trace of Fang Ru. There was only a ray of light, which seemed to have already entered into that brilliant starry sky world and headed towards the heaven full of stars. Because Futian was leveraging the will of Ziwei the Great, he was able to merge with a heaven full of stars. Fang Ru had now actually gone over to attack, attempting to capture Futian. Above the firmament, everyone saw that the light became even more radiant. Only those top cultivators could perceive the situation taking place in the starry sky. The stars in the heavens seemed to be moving like real stars, gigantic and massive. These humongous stars turned into meteors and slammed down at Fang Ru. The power that was generated from the stars that turned into meteors was plenty frightening. At the same time, many meteors fell, slamming into Fang Ru and his miniature world. Rumble! The sky seemed to be shaking fiercely. Fang Ru raised his head and looked up. Instantly, all the power of the heavens seemed to vibrate and resonate with him. He raised his palm, and the heavens trembled. Infinite power of the great path gathered around as if affected by his every move. The gestures of his hands seemed to influence the entire world. What a terrifying existence! Even Pikran Wang and those who had survived the divine tribulation of the great path felt this tremendous shake-up. How strong was someone who had achieved his fame millenniums ago? As if just by a simple gesture of raising a finger pointing the void, and instantly, the sky was thoroughly shaken up. Those falling meteors that came blasting down were attacked at the same moment. Streams of light rushed above the stars. Boom! It seemed that the sky was collapsing. The people below were shocked to see that the stars were exploding and being destroyed. It seemed as if they had been attacked by an inconceivable force, and all of them collapsed at the same moment. Any star attacking Fang Ru's direction was ultimately crushed in this madness. Incredible! The hearts of many trembled. Was this kind of power possible for mere mortals? None of them had expected that such incredulously terrifying power could be possible at the very peak of cultivation. If so, what kind of unimaginable power did the great emperor possess? Even Yi Futian was awed by Fang Ru's might. When he saw that so many stars had shattered and exploded, he clearly perceived that all the stars were attacked simultaneously. Under Fang Ru's finger, the power of the great path in all the heavens resonated with him. They blasted upon all the stars despite the spatial distance. He seemed to be able to take over the control of the great path power inside this world. Yi Futian had never come into contact personally with this kind of incredible power. Although he had slayed existences who survived the second divine tribulation of the great path, he did not do so, relying purely on his own strength. Leveraging the power of Ziwei the Great was not equivalent to using the power that belonged to himself. He hadn't yet reached that level, so it was difficult for him to really understand what that realm would feel like. Fang Ru's mighty strength made Yi Futian realize that it would be impossible to stop Fang Ru without the power of Ziwei the Great. Most likely, this man was standing at a level closest to and just beneath that of the great emperor. As his mind turned, it was as if he had entered into a state of selflessness. At this moment, the stars in all the heavens were shining at the same time the heavenly might descended. The phantom of Ziwei the Great became clearer. It was as if the great emperor had begun to awaken. Accompanied by the incoming heavenly might, even Fa Ru felt the pressure now as he raised his head to take on that gigantic phantom of the great emperor. Chapter 2400, Qianquan Finger. Yi Futian's figure appeared there as well. He stood below the shadows of the great emperor, looking like the descendant of a god. As he closed his eyes, divine light flared from his body. At this moment, the stars of the celestial skies all started shining simultaneously. Yi Futian's projection appeared on every single one of them. It was as if he existed everywhere at the same time. If I attack, then there's no going back. Senior, are you sure you want this battle? A voice echoed the void, resonating with the skies. Yi Futian's might exerted great pressure on all of the Ziwei segmentum. He could sense Fang Ru's power, and knew that normal attacks would likely not affect him. The only way was to use the might of the heavens in his attack. Divine lights swirled around Fang Ru. He raised his head, looked at the celestial skies, and said, "Do it." Great emperors were akin to gods. They could not be provoked. Even someone as strong as Fang Ru would be powerless before a great emperor. However, he was only facing the will of Ziwei the Great, and not the great emperor himself. Regardless, he still wanted a sense of how powerful the might of a great emperor would be. At this instant, the splendid vista world behind him expanded dramatically. It seemed as if it was turning into an actual world. Below the starry skies, a small world appeared. When this small world manifested, it started reeling in and swallowing the powers of the great paths of the world. In the vast, boundless space, it was as if everything was resonating with the small world. Just then, endless divine light started streaming down from the celestial skies, converging below Yi Futian. There, a supreme sword will started to form, giving rise to a divine sword that contained the might of the skies. This divine sword seemed to be capable of slashing the skies open, merging all of the celestial stars into one to form a divine sword, someone said. The cultivators all looked up in shock. The previous lord of the imperial palace met his demise under an attack similar to this. While Fang Ru's power was nearly immeasurable, could he really endure such an attack? No one would know. After all, one could see how powerful Fang Ru was based on his attack just now, but there was no way of knowing his full power at this point. Boom! Terrifying sounds could be heard ripping through the skies. The supersonic blasts caused the air to tremble. Below, countless people from the Ziwei segmentum looked up towards the celestial skies. They saw the might of the skies forcing downwards together with the projection of Ziwei the Great. The divine sword was before the great emperor, slashing out as if it was wielded by the gods. The great paths were collapsing, crushed, and were ultimately torn into fragments. Deep, terrifying cracks appeared. It looked like an omen before the entire world, falling apart. Yet even then, the divine sword was entirely unaffected. All of the gashes that appeared in the great path couldn't stop the ray of light from the sword. It continued to travel down the turbulence of cracks and gashes. It was unstoppable. Even escape by using the power of the great path of space wouldn't be possible, as space itself was collapsing as well. An attack on this level had already exceeded the physical limits of the void realm. Atop the skies, it was as if a crack had appeared, slashed open by the divine sword. Being able to receive an attack of the will of Ziwei the Great is an honor, Fang Ru said as he looked up. However, even though he was a supreme being in the past, he had already passed and shouldn't continue to exist in this world. The greatest of this time should belong to this era. His voice was humble yet arrogant, overflowing with an endless might of domination. When he raised his arm, it was as though all the powers of the world started flowing towards him and converging onto his arm. At this moment, Fang Ru's body flared magnificently. He looked like a divine frame, unparalleled in the mortal world. As he amassed unmatched power on his arms, countless divine lights started flowing towards his fingers. The divine lights flickering and erupting from his fingertips were more potent than the sharpest blades the world had ever seen. Qianquan finger! In the distance, old demon Tunchen, who was standing beside Yu Xing, said, Fang Ru created the legendary technique, Qianquan finger, on his own. It's extremely powerful. Going up against the starry divine sword of Ziwei the Great with a single finger? A demonic cultivator beside him said softly, unable to conceive what he had just heard. Although Fang Ru had made a name for himself thousands of years ago, it did not justify how he could be so confident. Old Demon Tunchen's voice sank as he said, Didn't you sense the power contained in that single finger? The stars in the sky were crushed. This finger contained the power of the universe, and he had condensed his full power into it. While the attacks before this were all spread out, the true ultimate Qiang finger would look like this, concentrated at a single point. Once it erupts, its power would be able to fill up and destroy my black hole whirlpool, which is said to be able to engulf the skies. He rated Fang Ru extremely highly. Even in his generation, there were only a handful of cultivators who had reached this level. Yu Xing and the other demonic cultivators were shocked by the comment. They all knew how terrifying old demon Tunchen's power of devouring was. It could literally devour everything, including celestial stars. Yet he just said that this one puny finger, upon eruption, would be able to fill his black hole whirlpool capable of devouring all matter. Every cultivator in this world has their own methods of cultivation. The cultivators of the Infinite Palace are skilled with the infinite, endless, and boundless. But some people are skilled with the concentration of power instead. Imagine two attacks with the same weight. Do you think it would have more explosive force when it has the magnitude of a mountain or that of a rock? Old Demon Tunchen continued as he watched the two attacks in the skies nearing each other. On top of that, the Qianquan finger isn't as simple as condensing and releasing the power of the skies. It was said that the Qianquan finger contained a small world, compressing the power of a whole world into a micro-world, operating based on some mysterious law. It seemed to be compressing an endlessly large supreme mythical matrix into one finger. When it erupts, its power will be unmatched. As he spoke, the might of the celestial skies continued to force downward. Even they could feel the power despite it being so high up. The projection of Ziwei the Great descended with the divine sword as Fang Ru was pointing to the sky with one finger. It was as though the two attacks weren't even on the same order of magnitude. At this moment, Fang Ru looked so small and vulnerable. It was as though he would be crushed by any attack at all. But at the instant when the two attacks really came into contact, the cultivator's visions were filled with a blinding light of obliteration which had erupted and deluged the skies, blocking out everything. The celestial stars were crushed and exploded in a massive chain reaction. Even the divine sword, the power of which was nearly unimaginable just moments ago, was disintegrating bit by bit. As the blast continued upwards, stars from even further out in the galaxy were obliterated as well. Many people couldn't see what was happening as the blinding light flared in the skies. Yet, when the light finally faded away, they saw that the divine sword had disappeared. Atop the skies, the projection of Ziwei the Great was still there, and so was Yi Futian. However, his aura was precarious, and he was shaken to the core. Below him, Fang Ru was blasted down from the skies, and his aura was equally unstable. His posture was also not as straight as before. The might of Ziwei the Great. It is indeed as powerful as legend says. But it was only the will of a great emperor after all, not an actual great emperor, Fang Ru said to Yi Futian, who stood in the skies. And this wasn't your own power either, so you can't show me the true divine power. Chapter 2401. Pleas from various forces? Yi Futian looked below. Naturally, he knew that Fang Ru was right, that the will of Ziwei the Great was hidden amongst the celestial stars. He could indeed borrow them in battle, but his plane was a little low after all. He was only 7th level Renhuang plane, so his powers were limited even after borrowing from the celestial stars, let alone in comparison with the actual great emperor. In fact, he didn't even manage to release 30% of the celestial powers. Otherwise, even if Fang Ru were only one step away from becoming great emperor, he would still be obliterated. So what if he was as powerful as one could be short of being a great emperor? The will of the great emperor was carved into the celestial stars. The explosive power of its attack was equivalent to a portion of the power of the great emperor. It was just that Yi Futian couldn't unleash it fully. Of course, even then, one could see how strong Fang Ru was. Even with such a powerful attack, all it did was make his finger bleed. It didn't actually waver him or injure his body of Wei. At this point, Fang Ru's aura was still terrifying, and the small world continued to circle him. The lights of the great paths of the skies streamed into the small world and resonated with it, contending with the divine might of the celestial stars. Princess Dongwang looked toward the figure high up in the sky and said, "I gave you a chance before. Now I'm giving you another chance. Follow me back to the Imperial Palace. If you are not directly related to him, we'll close one eye and stop chasing after you. But if you continue to be stubborn..." As she paused, her eyes turned cold, and her aura became dangerously sharp. She then continued, "You will die here." As she finished speaking, several figures walked out from behind her. Their mighty aura subdued that of even the celestial skies. Every one of them was an apex cultivator, and their terrifying auras could be sensed from miles away. Fang Ru levitated again. Divine lights surrounded him as his might fired up into the skies. The hearts of the Divine Prefecture cultivators trembled. That was the princess of the Divine Prefecture, and the only daughter of Dongwang the Great. So what if Yi Futian was an unmatched genius? He was lucky that the princess was willing to give him a chance to follow her back to the Imperial Palace to clear up the issue. If Yi Futian didn't comply, that would mean that he had lied to her. If that were the case, she could kill her then and there. Leaving him alive would serve no purpose. He could even betray them and join the other worlds in the future. Princess Donghuang's words made many of the Divine Prefecture forces that had a grudge with Yi Futian laugh inside. Yi Futian was way too confident. He even dared to start a war with the Imperial Palace. If that wasn't a death wish, then what was? No place in the Divine Prefecture could accommodate him at this point. Even his attempt this time to escape into the crevices of space to hide away from the Divine Prefecture was futile. The cultivators here could travel across worlds to chase after him, so there's no way he could escape. And if he left this celestial region, he would die even faster. Without borrowing power from the celestial skies, cultivators on the level of Fang Ru could easily deal with him. He could take Yi Futian's life with a snap of his finger. They were of a fundamentally different level. The expression of the cultivators from the Heavenly Mandate Academy and the Ziwei Segmentum all changed. They all felt a sense of despair when Princess Dongwang gave the kill order. Was there really no hope for Yi Futian? How did things become like this? At this point, it was as if every way was leading to a dead end. The cultivators from the other worlds all sneered inside. Yi Futian came out of nowhere and made a name for himself with his unparalleled talents. They even thought that a phenom of the era was about to rise from the land of the Divine Prefecture, which would become a threat to them. It was especially so for the Dark World, who had battled Yi Futian several times before. A powerful aura started to engulf the skies above Yi Futian as waves of dark divine lights started spreading towards there. The Divine Prefecture Imperial Palace cultivators frowned, then they saw the cultivators of the Dark World arriving. They turned out to be from the Dark Court. The leading figure's aura was especially terrifying. It was an apex-level cultivator as well. He was dressed in all black, and a terrifying aura of obliteration surrounded him. Princess Dongwang looked toward them. What were the people of the Dark Court doing here? Dongwang the Great was the prodigy of an era and met no opponent in his time. He spurred the great prosperity of the Divine Prefecture. Such an incredible being. I'm sure he wouldn't actually want to pick on the younger generation. Even if Yi Futian was related to Emperor Yi Qing, Emperor Yi Qing had already passed on. I'm sure that Dongwang the Great would remember their friendship and let some things go instead of taking out his grudge on a young boy, the cultivator from the Dark Court said. This caused those from the Divine Prefecture to show a strange expression. The Dark Court wanted to protect Yi Futian? They quickly realized what was happening. The Dark Court had some conflict with Yi Futian. If that had happened before this, naturally, they would want Yi Futian dead instead of him becoming their enemy. But now, knowing that Yi Futian could be related to Emperor Yi Qing and that the Divine Prefecture Imperial Palace even took action to kill him, the Dark Court instead wanted Yi Futian to stay alive. But as a result, wouldn't that enlarge the conflict between Yi Futian and the Divine Prefecture? Naturally, that was the situation they wanted to see happen. I thought so too, of course. Dongwang the Great wouldn't take things out on a youngster. A cultivator from the empty divine realm stepped forward as well. Under the celestial skies, what was happening now seemed rather odd. Back then, Yi Futian stood on the side of the Divine Prefecture in a war with the Dark World and the empty divine realm, and they had even won the war for them. What was this supposed to be now? The Divine Prefecture Imperial Palace wanted to kill Yi Futian, and the Dark World and the empty divine realm came to protect him instead. That was certainly interesting. The cultivators of the two worlds didn't stand out just now. They must have been waiting for the relationship between Yi Futian and the Divine Prefecture to deteriorate completely. Only when Princess Dongwang gave the order to eliminate Yi Futian did they actually step out. You have no right to meddle in the Divine Prefecture's business, Princess Dongwang said coldly as her gaze swept across the cultivators from the two groups. The original realm doesn't belong to any single organization today. We've mentioned this before. Perhaps it is time to revise the division of the original realm. Yi Futian is a cultivator of the original realm, and we think he won't belong to the Divine Prefecture or be a subordinate of the princess. So what right does that give princess to decide his fate? The cultivator from the Dark Court continued. Just then, Yuxing led his group to step forward as well. As such, the Devil World seemed to be protecting Yi Futian too. This made Feng Ru frown as there were actually 3 worlds intervening now. They all wanted to stop them from killing Yi Futian. Just then, another group of cultivators arrived from the skies, but they walked toward Princess Dongwang. The auras of these cultivators exuded justice and righteousness, and each of them had an outstanding temperament. They were cultivators from the human realm. One of the cultivators came before Princess Dongwang and said softly, Princess, past matters have already been settled, and now they are all just the past. Surely an unparalleled figure like Dongwang the Great wouldn't fuss over things of the past. Why should the princess care about a mere Renhuang plain cultivator? I'm afraid that could even affect the great emperor's reputation. How about we just leave him be? Unexpectedly, the human realm was standing up for Yi Futian as well. However, they seemed to be coming from a slightly different standpoint. Chapter 2402 Dialogue with the Great Emperor. Except for the Divine Prefecture, the cultivators across various worlds were pleading on Yi Futian's behalf. What was happening now seemed a little strange. Even Yi Futian himself looked puzzled above the sky. The Dark World and the empty Divine Realm were both principalities that had grievances against him, while he had never had many interactions with the human realm. On the contrary, the human realm was closer to the Imperial Palace in the Divine Prefecture. But now, they were advocating on his behalf. No doubt, the Dark World and the empty Divine Realm each have their own schemes, while the human realm seemed to be more concerned with the reputation of Dongwang the Great. As for the specific thoughts behind the action of each principality, it was something that only they know. Now, the problem was left in the hands of Princess Dongwang. She saw the situation unfolding in front of her. Those radiant beautiful eyes of hers looked at Yi Futian above the sky as she said coldly, Yi Futian violated the order of the imperial palace, and this is impertinent enough to declare war. It is an unforgivable offense. Princess Dongwang pressed too hard. Isn't it normal that others would resist under such circumstances? The top figures from the dark court said casually, seemingly taking Yi Futian's side. Judging from their posture, it seemed as if they were ready to intervene by force in order to prevent the people from the divine prefecture from taking action. Fang Ru levitated into the air, and the cultivators from the dark court and the empty divine realm were also standing in the vicinity, ready to battle at a moment's notice. If you insist on interfering in the matters of the divine prefecture, I will have no choice but to ask my father to adjudicate, Princess Dongwang said indifferently. Everyone who heard her narrowed their eyes slightly. Asking Dongwang the Great to adjudicate? Divine light dazzled upon Princess Dongwang, and a terrifying divine might was released from her. In an instant, the divine light seemed to spill down from the sky, penetrating through the starry sky world as if from the outer world. As this divine light enveloped this boundless space, an inordinately strong emperor's might effused from Princess Dongwang. Yonder, an elusive figure appeared. Clearly, it was not Dongwang the Great, but a projection of the great emperor onto the world. At this moment, cultivators from all sides, no matter who they were, lowered their heads and said, "Greetings to Dongwang the Great." "Greetings, great emperor," others said. Even most of the cultivators from the dark court, the empty divine realm, and the devil world saluted the great emperor to show their respect. Although they were on the opposing side, the great emperor was a supreme existence, and they were not opponents of Dongwang the Great in any way. In the presence of such supreme existence, even if they were hostiles, they still had to observe the necessary formalities. The phantom did not speak but looked at Yi Futian, who was above the starry sky. Yi Futian's heart trembled when he saw that figure. Once, he had seen the afterimage of Dongwang the Great on Sky Mountain. This time, it seemed that he was closer. He didn't expect that the great emperor would visit the original realm in person because of him. Fang Ru stepped aside and bowed, leaving it to Dongwang the Great to decide. Dongwang the Great kept his eyes on Yi Futian, which made Yi Futian feel an inexplicable coercion. Those eyes were so profound that he could not fathom any emotions within them. "It's pretty impressive for you to obtain the inheritance of Ziwei the Great until this day," Dongwang the Great said. "This is a feat worthy of being his successor." The words of Dongwang the Great shocked all the cultivators who heard him. The great emperor had spoken and personally stated Yi Futian's identity. He was indeed the heir of Emperor Yi Qing. No wonder Yi Futian didn't quite understand everything. Maybe he could be considered half an heir of Emperor Yi Qing, but he was far from being his successor. They had met just that one time, but Emperor Yi Qing knew of his true identity. But could Dongwang the Great really be in the dark about who he really was, even confusing him with the successor of Emperor Yi Qing? Great Emperor, so many years have passed since the events of yesteryear. Perhaps the great emperor already left those things behind. The top cultivator from the human realm spoke with lowered head. Dongwang the Great glanced at the speaker but did not say a word. He continued to stare at Yi Futian. At this moment, another astonishing aura descended from above, which alarmed everyone present. Another super-powerful aura. Who could it be? "Dongwang!" A voice was heard from the sky, and the crowd looked in the direction where the voice came from. A space-time passage seemed to have opened above the firmament. An image appeared at the end of the passage. It appeared to be a simple courtyard with a figure sitting quietly in the middle of it. The figure was looking in their direction. An endless distance separated them. Many people were shocked beyond words. How far away was this person? "Teacher, it's been a long time." Dongwang the Great looked at the figure in the courtyard and talked to him from across the air. That figure, surprisingly, was the teacher of Four Corner Village. "Indeed, it has been many years," the teacher said. "I still remember when you first came to the village once upon a time. Many years later Yi Futian came as well, and I felt some similarities between the two of you. Specifically, that you are one of a kind. I didn't know the teacher holds him in such high regard," Dongwang the Great said. No wonder he was selected. This young lad is really not bad. Perhaps, in the future, he might have the opportunity to chase in your footsteps. The teacher continued. But Dongwang the Great smiled when he heard these words and said, Since the teacher sees it this way, I am also curious now to see how far this lad can go in the future. Well, if so, I won't say more. If you have the time, come and visit the village sometimes, said the teacher. Definitely. Dongwang the Great nodded. Then the divine light retracted as the passageway disappeared along with the teacher's figure, which had now disappeared from the imagery. Everything returned to normal. It was as if everything that had just happened was an illusion, that nothing had really transpired. But it was also real. Was the dialogue between two great emperors real? From beginning to end, the teacher had never begged Dongwang the Great to spare Yi Futian. It was more like a casual chat between two old friends. However, these few random words seemed to have determined Yi Futian's fate. They could see that Dongwang the Great had agreed to let Yi Futian go. The teacher said that perhaps Yi Futian could walk in his footsteps. And Dongwang the Great said that was something he would like to see. As the world knew, Dongwang the Great was an unparalleled character. Emperor Yi Qing had already perished. Would Dongwang the Great care about a young lad? The great emperor who had suppressed an entire era was such a mighty existence. Would he be afraid of a young lad who might threaten him? Of course not. He was Dongwang the Great. You can handle the matters here yourself. Dongwang the Great left with one last command, then looked at Yi Futian one last time. His figure gradually dissipated. Afterward, it was as if he had never appeared in the first place. The last sentence was clearly addressing Princess Dongwang, telling her to conclude the matter at hand. Clearly, he did not intend to take action against Yi Futian himself. Phew! At this moment, the Heavenly Mandate Academy and other cultivators let out a deep breath. Was this over now? At the end of the day, they never expected that cultivators from all the worlds would stand up to protect Yi Futian, or that the teacher from Four Corner Village would have opened up a channel to start a dialogue with Dongwang the Great so that Yi Futian's life could be spared. Chapter 2403 Life After Catastrophe. Dongwang the Great had decided not to take action against Yi Futian, which meant that the imperial palace of the Divine Prefecture would no longer pose a threat to Yi Futian. Everyone had thought that Yi Futian was a dead man for sure, but they never expected such a dramatic turn of events. What would Princess Dongwang do next? Yi Futian was considered very powerful in the original realm. Although he was far from capable of contending alone with the many forces in the Divine Prefecture, in one-on-one situations, there was no single force below the level of Ancient God Clan that Yi Futian couldn't overcome. Counting in the strength from the Lost Clan, then even the Ancient God Clan was no competition. No one was off-limit, given the power controlled by Yi Futian. Even the Ancient God Clan might even be suppressed. Yi Futian had been confirmed as the successor of Emperor Yi Qing, thus making him an enemy of the Imperial Palace and Divine Prefecture by default. Would Princess Dongwang allow him to continue developing his own power freely? But Dongwang the Great had already said that he wanted to see where Yi Futian could go in the future. Clearly, he didn't care. How could a great emperor, unparalleled in the world, possibly be afraid of a young lad? In the many years that had passed, how many great emperors, such as Dongwang the Great, had come to pass in this world? Everyone's attention was fixed on Princess Dongwang. She was looking at Yi Futian above the firmament right now and proclaimed, "From this day forward, principalities belonging to Yi Futian will no longer be ruled by the Divine Prefecture. Ziwei Segmentum may make a choice, same as the various forces currently under the rule of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. As for the Lost Clan, which had already agreed to submit under the jurisdiction of the Imperial Palace, it may no longer be involved with Yi Futian henceforth." Once, when all the forces laid siege upon the Lost Clan, she came forward and saved them. The agreement was for the Lost Clan to accept the Imperial Palace and Divine Prefecture and submit to its rule. Given this condition, they could no longer ally with Yi Futian. If the alliance with Yi Futian were to continue, they would lose protection from the Imperial Palace. As for the Ziwei Segmentum, it was left by Ziwei the Gria and was never intended as a principality that belonged to the Divine Prefecture. Likewise, the Heavenly Mandate Academy consisted mostly of relationships developed by Yi Futian. Therefore, Princess Dongwang allowed them to make their own choices. However, among the two forces outside of the Lost Clan, the will of Ziwei the Great had long resonated with Yi Futian, and because of that, the Ziwei segmentum would probably never escape his control. The Heavenly Mandate Academy was one with Yi Futian for so long that it was simply impossible for it ever to betray him. We have been entrusted by Ziwei the Great to do his bidding. The Palace Lord, once obtained the inheritance of Ziwei the Great, became the Palace Lord of the Ziwei Imperial Palace and took charge of the Ziwei segmentum. This is the will of Ziwei the Great, and those who cultivate in the Ziwei segmentum must heed it. We hope the princess will understand, Ban Huangchun explained. The Heavenly Mandate Academy was built by Yi Futian single-handedly. Without Yi Futian, the Heavenly Mandate Academy would not have been possible. I hope the princess will forgive us. Lord Taixian of the Heavenly Mandate Academy also spoke up. There was no doubt that they were willing to stand by Yi Futian. We were never part of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. We ended up there only after being threatened by Yi Futian to submit. Now we are willing to serve the princess, said a dissenting voice. It was none other than the college chief of the former Tianshan Academy, Jianao. That's right, we were forced by Yi Futian to be part of the Heavenly Mandate Academy, and now we are willing to serve the princess, said another voice. All those remnant forces from the 9 realms that had surrendered to the Heavenly Mandate Academy now seized their chance to rebel. The current situation was turbulent, to say the least. Following Princess Dongwang and serving the Imperial Palace directly was the way to survive in these troubled times. Yi Futian had now offended the Imperial Palace and the Divine Prefecture beyond repair. His own safety was in jeopardy, and he would have to watch his back at all times. They were no fools, so they knew how to choose. Shameless beasts! Sky River Great Elder rebuked coldly. Instead of killing them back then, their lives had been spared, and they were given a chance to surrender. They never expected them to change their tunes so quickly and decisively now. But Yi Futian, who was still above the sky, didn't feel quite that way. Betrayal was commonplace for these people, and he didn't really care. Emperor Yi Qing was once his greatest secret. Now that it had been revealed, it was fortunate for him to be able to survive the revelation of such news. He had been worried about a day like this for a very long time and didn't know what outcome to expect. The situation at the moment was far better than what he had ever imagined. This was supposed to be a catastrophe. Very good. Princess Dongwang nodded and continued. After you return, report to the empty Imperial Palace. Yes, Princess. Everyone bowed and nodded, greatly overjoyed in their hearts. It was a stroke of good luck to be rid of Yi Futian and follow the Imperial Palace. The teacher and my father are old acquaintances. For the sake of the teacher, I will no longer pursue the matters from today. Princess Dongwang looked at Yi Futian, who was high above the sky. She then turned around and looked into the distance as she continued. From this day forward, Yi Futian is no longer under the jurisdiction of the Imperial Palace in the Divine Prefecture. All your grievances are yours to resolve independently. In addition, the teacher has already made his stance known today. Since my father has decided not to interfere with his affairs, the teacher will no longer interfere with ours in the future. The words of Princess Dongwang couldn't be more clear to those cultivators from the various forces of the Divine Prefecture. Those who had been enemies with Yi Futian snickered in their hearts and understood the significance of the princess's words. This was no less than a declaration of open season on Yi Futian. What she meant was that the teacher from Four Corner Village could no longer stop them. It seemed that the princess was pretty upset about what has transpired today. After all, Yi Futian openly resisted the imperial order and defied her. In addition, as the only daughter of Dongwang the Great, and with Yi Futian being the successor of Emperor Yi Qing, the two of them were destined to be enemies, fateful opponents. Therefore, it was completely reasonable for Princess Dongwang to harbor some grudges toward Yi Futian. The cultivators from the Heavenly Mandate Academy did not look so good. From now on, the cultivators from the Divine Prefecture would have no more worries about the future. Now, without the Lost Clan, Yi Futian's strength would be greatly reduced. Once he left the Ziwei segmentum, he might be hunted by the forces from the Divine Prefecture. Yi Futian was still in control of the Ziwei cultivation court, as well as the inheritance of several great emperors. Now, there was Emperor Yi Qing on top of everything else. So there was no telling how many others would covet what was in Yi Futian's possession. Let's go. After having said that, Princess Dongwang gave the order to leave. The cultivators from the Imperial Palace of Divine Prefecture left with her just as suddenly as she had spoken. People from other top principalities in the Divine Prefecture left with her as well. Without Princess Dongwang here, none of them dared to dawdle any longer in the Ziwei segmentum. After all, this was the territory controlled by Yi Futian, and in it, even those who had survived the second divine tribulation of the Great Path couldn't best him. If Yi Futian wished to hurt them, it could be very bad for them. With shining rays of light, cultivators from all sides withdrew. Soon, those who cultivated in the Divine Prefecture disappeared altogether. Cultivators from the human realm left along with them as well. However, the cultivators from the Dark World and the empty Divine Realm were still there. At this time, the leader of the Dark World looked at Yi Futian and said, "Although there were some grievances between Ren Huanyi and us, if Ren Huanyi is willing to enter the Dark Court to cultivate, we will not take any action. Instead, we will protect Ren Huanyi from the persecution of the Divine Prefecture. The empty Divine Realm welcomes you as well." The cultivators from two major worlds were not just actively recruiting Yi Futian, but were offering to put aside the many grievances that had appeared between them over the years. This was in spite of the fact that Yi Futian had killed many cultivators of the Dark World. He was the successor of Emperor Yi Qing. He was tremendously talented, and he had a great emperor standing behind him to boot. He was way too valuable of an asset. The point was that Yi Futian and the Imperial Palace and the Divine Prefecture were now on opposing sides. And because of Emperor Yi Qing, they would be mortal enemies with no possibility of reconciliation. If Yi Futian could be groomed as a weapon to be used against the Divine Prefecture one day, why pass up such a great opportunity? Future prospects aside, even Yi Futian now was already a prize with the strength he possessed and the power he controlled. Yi Futian glanced briefly at the cultivators from these two major worlds. Obviously, he understood their intentions quite well, so he responded without hesitation. "Both of you have spoken up for me today. If something unforeseen happens in the future, I will remember what occurred today." Clearly, this was a soft letdown. "In that case, we will be leaving now." They didn't say anything more. They would be watching how Yi Futian planned to engage with the principalities from the Divine Prefecture. Chapter 2404 Abandoned. After the various forces left, Yi Futian descended from the starry sky. The sky was reconstructed, and the starry dimension disappeared. Myriads of stars disappeared from the sight of the crowd along with the silhouette of Ziwei the Great. Yi Futian landed in Ziwei Imperial Palace. Yuxing came up behind him. The cultivators of Ziwei Imperial Palace and the Heavenly Mandate Academy all gathered around him. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief now that this ordeal had come to an end. However, they still couldn't put their worries to rest completely since danger was still lurking. Right now, they were besieged on all sides. They had even offended the Imperial Palace of the Divine Prefecture. The forces from the Divine Prefecture would no longer have any scruple about attacking Yi Futian and his allies. The former might even join forces to attack them. Of course, their prerequisite was that Yi Futian and his group left the Ziwei segmentum. After all, if they chose to attack Yi Futian in the Ziwei segmentum, they had to be prepared to face annihilation. A gentle breeze blew past, and everyone felt a bit chilly. The cultivators stared at Yi Futian silently. Their journey from now on would most likely be arduous. The various worlds were in chaos, and they were trapped here with a slim chance of breaking out of this predicament in a short time. "We will temporarily abandon the Heavenly Mandate Academy," announced Yi Futian. Immediately, all the cultivators from the Heavenly Mandate Academy were overwhelmed with sorrow. They had formed deep bonds with the Heavenly Mandate Academy. Unfortunately, they were forced to abandon it now. Yi Futian instructed, "Lord Tai Xian, please make a trip to the Heavenly Mandate Academy and make arrangements for the cultivators who are still in the lower worlds to come to the Ziwei segmentum." Then, please destroy the teleportation grand matrix. Lord Taishian nodded. He was aware that in doing so, they would completely sever the connection between the Heavenly Mandate Academy and the Ziwei Segmentum, abandoning their base at the Heavenly Mandate Academy. All these years, Yi Futian had contributed a lot to the Heavenly Mandate realm and the original realm. He had even been crowned the ruler of the original realm. However, the continual arrival of various forces in the original realm messed up the situation. This recent ordeal further complicated things. Everything had changed. Yi Futian was kicked out of the game. He was but an outsider now. He had to desert his base at the Heavenly Mandate realm and leave the original realm temporarily. Nobody here questioned Yi Futian's motive in doing so. All of them were aware that he was forced to make such a decision. The current Heavenly Mandate Academy was a dangerous place to be in. If they chose to remain in the lower worlds, they would be attacked at any moment. They would naturally not leave behind the teleportation grand matrix for their enemies to use. After the rest of their members from the Academy arrived, they had to destroy the matrix. Lord Taishian swiftly led others to carry out the plan. Yi Futian said, "Right now, the original realm has undergone major changes. Cultivators from various worlds had come to the realm. However, all these things do not concern us now. In the coming years, we can only stay and cultivate in the Ziwei Segmentum. Fortunately, there is the Starry Cultivation Court which was left by Ziwei the Great. It is very beneficial for our cultivation. I'll meditate in the Starry Cultivation Court for a period of time. At the same time, I'll help everyone here with your cultivation too." Prior to this, he had quite a few allies from the Divine Prefecture. However, after today's incident, they had left him. After all the forces in the Divine Prefecture were under the command of the Donghuang Imperial Palace. Who would dare go against the Donghuang Imperial Palace and support him? Yi Futian himself also did not wish for his friends to do so. If they did so, they would be dragged into this murky mess. For you, increasing your cultivation plane is indeed the most important matter now, said Emperor Nan. Yi Futian was currently a 7th tier Renhuang. If he cultivated to the 9th tier and relied on the power of the starry sky in battle, even cultivators of Fang Ru's level would not be able to withstand his attacks. Even if he did not do so, once he cultivated to the peak of the Renhuang plane and relied on the sacred remains of Xinjia the Great Emperor and the divine Guqin of Shinin the Great, Yi Futian would also certainly be able to unleash even more terrifying might. When the time came, he would no longer be restricted wherever he went. At least when he was against some super-powerful cultivators, he would have more power to defend himself. However, the matters of the outside world did not concern them now. "Do you want to cultivate in the Devil World?" Yu Xing asked Yi Futian. If Yi Futian went to the Devil World, he would not be restricted by others. Yi Futian shook his head. Over transmitted thoughts, he said to Yu Xing, "Only we know what happened back then. Now, our identities are unclear. The Devil World might have accepted you because your identity is special. However, it is different for me. No matter what I do, I will need to be more cautious." Yu Xing did not say anything. He understood that what Yi Futian said was correct. Only the two of them knew what had happened back then. Yi Futian was never considered an heir of Emperor Yi Qing. Yu Xing's father had been the one who raised Yi Futian. However, he did not teach Yi Futian any cultivation techniques. He only said that Yi Futian was born an emperor. As for Yu Xing, he would become Yi Futian's support. Hence, Yi Futian's identity was definitely not what the outside world imagined it to be. It was not as simple as him being the heir of Emperor Yi Qing. Besides that, the way the Devil Emperor treated Yu Xing, as well as the fact that the Devil Emperor was unwilling to tell Yu Xing his identity, made him suspicious about his own origins. Yi Futian continued advising Yu Xing. "Yu Xing, although I am restricted now, you are from the Devil World so that no one will dare touch you. You can still train in the outside world. The original realm has undergone a huge change, and there are various fateful encounters out there. You can venture out and explore with the various cultivators from the Devil World to see whether you can claim some fateful encounters for yourself." Yu Xing nodded his head slightly. A cold look flashed past in his eyes as he said, I will investigate those who spread the rumors. Yuxing clearly wanted to get back at them. They had ulterior motives for intentionally spreading rumors claiming Yi Futian was related to Emperor Yi Qing. They wanted Yi Futian dead. For now, don't get into large-scale conflicts with the forces of the Divine Prefecture. Both of us need to keep a low profile. When we are sufficiently powerful in the future, we will not need to worry about being unable to seek revenge, said Yi Futian. Yuxing was somewhat unsatisfied, but he still nodded his head. However, he thought to himself that if he encountered the members of the Divine Prefecture when he was searching for fateful encounters outside, he would not show them mercy. Yi Futian glanced around at the other cultivators and said, I am sorry to have troubled all of you with this. Palace Lord, we have been cultivating in the Ziwei segmentum all this while. Now you have opened up the cultivation court of Ziwei the Great for us. How can this be considered trouble? Said Ren Huangqin. Xiao Dingtian from the Xiao clan said, The Heavenly Mandate Academy originally rose to prominence because of you. If it weren't for you, whether or not we would be able to survive until today in this chaotic world would be up for debate. How can this be considered trouble? The Ziwei segmentum is much larger than the 9 realms. It's pretty nice to cultivate here. Others also spoke up. Although their current situation was frustrating, recalling everything that had happened, they knew that Yi Futian had already done good enough as he led them forward. It is good to cultivate in seclusion for some time. We can improve our abilities, added Emperor Nan. They would most likely need to cultivate for quite some time. For the foreseeable future, they would not be leaving this place. Dongwang the Great promised to not meddle in your affairs. Once you overcome the divine tribulation, nothing will be able to stop you from going wherever you want, said Fang Gai. He seemed to be comforting Yi Futian. I understand, said Yi Futian as he nodded his head. He glanced over the familiar faces around him. He felt a sense of warmth well up inside him. He still had so many friends standing beside him and supporting him. He had no right to be decadent and slack. In the heavenly mandate realm of the original realm, news of the war in the Ziwei segmentum spread. Lord Taixian led all of the cultivators of the Heavenly Mandate Academy away and then destroyed the teleportation Grand Matrix. After that, the cultivators from various forces descended upon the Heavenly Mandate realm and occupied the ruins of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. They also began to conquer the Heavenly Mandate City. All the cultivators of the Heavenly Mandate realm felt a sense of sadness over this incident. Had the figure of their faith left the Heavenly Mandate realm just like that? He had actually been dealt with by the Imperial Palace. An era had ended. The era of Yi Futian was ended by the Imperial Palace. No one knew what the fate of the Heavenly Mandate realm would be. Now, the cultivators here were at the mercy of the other forces. There would most likely be no one like Yi Futian, whose core tenet was to protect the Heavenly Mandate realm. At the moment, around the ruins of the Heavenly Mandate Academy, many cultivators had gathered. They were from all corners of the Heavenly Mandate realm. An old man had brought along a youth. When the old man saw the scene before him, he sighed. Grandfather, has something happened to Renhuan Yi? Then, who will protect the Heavenly Mandate realm in the future? The youth asked as he looked at the ruins. No, Renhuan Yi has only left temporarily. He will return in the future, replied the old man. However, how many years would it be before the hope of the Heavenly Mandate realm returned? Chapter 2405, Seclusion. All the cultivators of the Heavenly Mandate Academy had migrated to the Ziwei segmentum. Yi Futian ordered them to build a new Heavenly Mandate Academy in Ziwei Imperial, the main city of the Ziwei segmentum. This allowed the disciples of the academy, who followed him all the way here, to have a place for meditation. This would hopefully make up for their loss. At the same time, the core members of the academy could enter Ziwei Imperial Palace freely. Besides that, they were allowed to use the palace, and even the starry cultivation court, for cultivation. Everything proceeded in an orderly manner. After Yi Futian had decided to go into seclusion, he planned to sever the Ziwei segmentum from the original realm. For the next few years, they would quietly cultivate here and stop caring about the matters outside. However, several days later, Yuxing still brought them some news. It was related to the forces involved in spreading the rumors back then. The ancient god clan from the Divine Prefecture was not involved. Instead, the forces involved were the top forces from the Divine Prefecture. On top of that, the Shan clan, Nahai family, the Shangqing Domain Chief's manor, and the Donghua Domain Chief's manor had participated too. After these forces learned of the news, they spread it around immediately, ensuring that Princess Dongwang got wind of it. Actually, Princess Dongwang had known about it beforehand. However, she was forced to meddle in the affair by coming to Ziwei Imperial Palace directly after the news had been spread around. Yi Futian did nothing after learning the truth, but he kept a list of the forces involved in his mind. The vendetta between the Shan clan and him stemmed from what happened between him and the Shan clan of the original realm in the past. His grudges with the Donghua Domain Chief's manor went without saying. However, he was surprised that the Shangqing Domain Chief's manor was involved in this too. Even though there was some friction between them, Yi Futian had not expected that the other party would want him dead. From the looks of it, there were indeed many people in the Divine Prefecture who wished for his death. The ones that he knew were only the forces that made their goal apparent. Many other enemies wanted to kill him. Yi Futian did not put much thought into this matter. Now that the ordeal was over, he did not have much to worry about since Hua Jieyu had returned to his side and he had met Yu Xing. Yi Futian could fully concentrate on cultivating in peace. In the starry cultivation court of Ziwei Imperial Palace, there were many cultivators around. After Yi Futian entered the court, he raised his head and glanced at the endless stars in the sky. Hua Jieyu stood beside him quietly. She followed him here, and they prepared to cultivate together for a period of time. Jieyu, the teachings of the great emperor that you acquired are a little bizarre. During our seclusion this time, I want to work on other aspects aside from improving our cultivation planes. We can rely on each other's cultivation to deepen our understanding of the art of cultivating, Yi Futian said gently. There were no secrets between him and Hua Jieyu. The two of them would share what they had mastered separately so that they could improve together. Hua Jieyu nodded in agreement. I agree. However, this time, we might need to cultivate for a long time. I'm afraid that it will be quite boring, Yi Futian said while staring at her lovingly. We have been apart for decades. There was nothing more painful than our separation. With you by my side now, how could I possibly feel bored? Hua Jieyu replied softly. The two of them exchanged a glance and smiled. Then, their figures flashed, and they dashed towards the stars. A lot of people were staring at their silhouettes. Some were envious of their relationship, while some wished for their happiness. After going through countless challenges, the two could finally be with each other now. Even though we have just experienced a huge disaster, it might be a blessing in disguise. Fortune and misfortune are two sides of the same coin, after all. Little brother got rid of one of his worries and can now focus on cultivating. He has Jieyu by his side now too. It can be said that his current situation is rather perfect. Zhuge Mingyu and Gu Donglu stood side by side in the sky as they looked at Yi Futian and Hua Jieyu. A glint of joy flashed in Zhuge Mingyu's eyes as she said this. Gu Donglu nodded and said, Jieyu has been little brother's concern for all these years. Now, he can finally rest his worry and cultivate quietly for a few years. Unfortunately, someone else has to suffer. Zhuge Mingyu sighed while smiling wryly. Gu Donglu looked towards a spot down below upon hearing her words. He saw a beautiful silhouette sitting and meditating there quietly. However, she looked somewhat lonely. In the starry sky above, Yi Futian and Hua Jieyu went to the highest spot. Then, they sat cross-legged in the high heavens while the rest of the cultivators were cultivating down below. Not long after, all the stars lit up. Endless starlight shone on Yi Futian and Hua Jieyu, causing them to glimmer. At the same time, the entire starry cultivation court grew even brighter. Endless starlight rained down, allowing the cultivators beneath to also sense the aura hidden in this place. They could particularly sense the powerful auras hidden in the imperial stars as they were showered in starlight. Lord Taixian, Sky River Great Elder, Emperor Nan, Old Ma, and many other cultivators looked at the two silhouettes in the starry sky. Yi Futian was the embodiment of all their hopes. The future of all the cultivators present here depended on him. Lord Taishian and the elders knew that they had little hope of turning the tide themselves. Aside from Yi Futian, most of his companions had also inherited the teachings of the great emperors. Yi Futian, along with Yu Xing, Hua Jieyu, and Gu Donglu, were the future of this starry world. However, they first needed some time. Yi Futian and the others began cultivating in seclusion in the starry cultivation court of Ziwei Imperial Palace. Meanwhile, in the original realm, storms were stirring up again. The cultivators of the various worlds were fighting over the fateful encounters that appeared. Regardless if they were relics in the heavenly mandate realm, or those that appeared in the original realm, all of them were being fought over by the various cultivators. The cultivators from the Divine Prefecture, the Dark World, the Empty Divine Realm, the Human Realm, and the Devil World were in constant friction with each other. Many small-scale conflicts erupted between them. However, they were still cautious towards one another. Therefore, no large-scale battles had occurred. However, the Dark World and the Empty Divine Realm were always ready to move. They wanted to attack the Divine Prefecture many times, yet the Human Realm seemed to lean towards siding with the Divine Prefecture. Hence, these two major worlds had yet to seize the opportunity to start a divine war. The original realm was still changing rapidly. This was also one of the reasons why the war had yet to erupt. The various forces wanted to pillage more relics to increase their power. For now, no one wanted to face each other head-on. Yet, as time passed and there were more and more conflicts between them, many cultivators ended up perishing. At the same time, the monstrous Renhuangs with exceptional talent were developing more rapidly than before. However, all this seemed unrelated to Yi Futian's group. After several years, in the starry cultivation court of Ziwei Imperial Palace, many cultivators were still cultivating inside. They did not involve themselves with matters of the outside world. They were considered the only top force within the original realm that had not participated in the conflict. Right then, many people looked up high in the sky. Up in the starry sky, many illusory figures appeared. They were all silhouettes of Yi Futian. They seemed to be everywhere, and each one was as real as the original. Buzz! Beams of sword light shot across and illuminated the starry sky. The various silhouettes stabbed out at the same time in tens of thousands of permutations. Yi Futian was obviously comprehending swordsmanship. Many people were watching from below as he practiced. Everyone seemed to have their own comprehension of what they saw. These past years, aside from comprehending the Great Path and increasing his cultivation plane, Yi Futian also trained in attack techniques. He cultivated a myriad of techniques, many of which were powerful divine techniques passed down from the great emperors. However, since they were not his own power, he could not unleash their full potential. Hence, he needed to rely on his own ability to comprehend the techniques again in order to better utilize them. He then had to merge them, using his powers of the Great Path to make them even stronger. These years, the cultivators in the starry cultivation court witnessed Yi Futian's growth. It was not just Yi Futian. The others were also improving. As the years passed, the outside world changed swiftly without cease. Only within the starry cultivation court did time seem to stop. 10 years felt like a day. Just like that, more than 10 years went by. It seemed to have passed like the snap of one's fingers. Chapter 2406, Traveling Far. It was the year 10080 on the Divine Prefecture calendar, and the 80th year of cultivation for Yi Futian. That day, under the starry night sky, Yi Futian and Hua Ji were bathing under the starlight. Both of their auras were rich and strong, their bodies shined magnificently, and divine light encircled them. Their planes had become deeper. Yi Futian had reached the 8th level Renhuang plane. Just one more level and he would be at the peak of the Renhuang plane. As for Hua Jiayu, she had already reached the 9th plane after inheriting the Brahma's pure sky empress's cultivation and her millions of incarnations. In the ensuing years, she had been stabilizing her cultivation plane, only deepening it when she found the inheritance of a great emperor. Hua Jiayu had now truly reached peak 9th level and was entering a bottleneck. If she went up just one more step, she would encounter the 3 tribulations. Both of them stopped cultivating. As they watched the numerous figures cultivating under the starlight, all sorts of feelings and thoughts welled up in their hearts. More than 10 years. It's my first time cultivating for such a long time, Futian said softly. He'd never cultivated continuously for so long. But this time, he was forced to do so as he had to raise his power level. Dangers lurked everywhere out there, and many wanted him dead, forcing him to focus on strengthening his powers. Hua Jiyu nodded lightly. It was her first time cultivating for so long as well. Being under the starry sky and bathing under the divine might of a great emperor helped with gaining deeper understandings, which made it very suitable for cultivation. It's already year 10080 of the divine prefecture calendar, and I'm reaching 100 years old soon. Time flies. Futian smiled as he spoke. Yeah, same for me. Hua Jiyu smiled as well as she looked toward Futian. They had known each other when it was year 10,000 on the divine prefecture calendar. Back then, they were still teenagers. Now, they were almost 100 years old. It did make one feel a little sentimental. Of course, it was extremely rare to have someone reach such a level of cultivation under 100. Their cultivation levels are rising far faster than their age, which made them both look really young. Futian, with his fully white hair, still looked extraordinarily handsome, and his temperament alone would make him stand out in any crowd. He far surpassed his charm as a teenager. Hua Jiyu still looked stunningly beautiful. It was as if she was a goddess of the 9 heavens. Futian Jiyu, Zhuge Mingyu called out. Y'all haven't come down in a while. Beside her, Gu Dongliu's aura was also starkly different from years ago. Not too long ago, he had reached 7th level Renhuang plane. Back then, he received an inheritance from the demon realm. Afterward, he received the inheritance of the imperial stars under this starry sky. While the opportunities he had encountered couldn't compare to Futian's, it far surpassed the vast majority of cultivators in this world. Really, there were really not many who had such chances. The cultivation levels of Xiaomuyu, Dou Zhao, Nan Luoshan, and others had also increased significantly. Of course, the one who had improved the fastest was Chen Yi, despite looking as if he never took anything seriously. There was a time when he was at a higher cultivation plane than Futian. Even now, he was still on the same level as Futian, reaching 8th level Renhuang plane. Since becoming acquainted with Futian in the Donghua domain, this guy always had a sense of mystery surrounding him. Today, even Futian felt that he couldn't see through Chen Yi entirely. Futian knew that Chen Yi was the same as himself and held some secrets. But he never asked. After all, who didn't have secrets? Chen Yi had saved his life before and treated him sincerely. To him, that was sufficient. It was indeed a long cultivation session. Futian smiled as he nodded. Futian, Old Ma, Blind Tai, and Lord Taixian all walked over, and the group gathered together. Chief Elder, what's happening outside now? Futian asked. Although he hadn't paid attention to the outside world for more than 10 years, Ren Huangchen regularly sought information from out there to be aware of the basic situation. It's chaotic out there, but many relics have surfaced. Many of the organizations had made great gains, including emperor-level inheritance. This turbulent era is the best and the worst at the same time, Ren Huangchen said. Futian nodded. Opportunities tend to appear in times of chaos. But after so many years, many people had left the original realm and returned to where they came from. Especially the top forces who had already obtained the relics of great emperors. They didn't dare to stay as they feared being targeted by everyone else, and they knew not to be greedy. As a result, the number of forces in the original realm has been gradually decreasing. Ren Huangchen continued. The conflicts between various worlds never stopped, but they also didn't launch an all-out war. Perhaps it isn't time yet. How about the Heavenly Mandate realm? How are they now? Futian asked. The situation at the Heavenly Mandate realm isn't looking good now, Ren Huangchen said nonchalantly. Futian had an idea what that meant, so he didn't ask more about it. Without the Heavenly Mandate Academy, of course the Heavenly Mandate realm wouldn't be doing well. Futian, what are your plans after this? Continue to cultivate and raise your power levels? Lord Taishian asked. Yi Futian had already reached the 8th level Renhuang Plane. Even amongst all Renhuang Plane cultivators, it would be hard to match him equally. But out there were many tribulation-level cultivators and even terrifyingly powerful individuals like Fa Ru. They were still a little lacking if they wanted to venture out there. Amongst them, there were no apex-level cultivators to protect Yi Futian. Nope. Yi Futian shook his head. After cultivating for so many years, I feel that I'm improving at a slower rate. It must be that I'm encountering a bottleneck. Jiayu had reached peak level Renhuang Plane and needs an opportunity to break the shackles of the Renhuang Plane. So I would like to travel far. There were still too many dangers in the original realms so that they couldn't venture at ease. Yi Futian was actually planning to leave the original realm to travel. Travel far? The cultivators were a little startled. They asked, Where? First, we'll visit the Divine Prefecture. I need to return to Four Corner Village for a bit. Afterward, perhaps we will travel to the Western world, Yi Futian answered. The Western world? A rather surprised expression appeared on the cultivators' faces. The Western world was unfamiliar to them, and all they knew was that Dongwang the Great once went there to cultivate. Why would Yi Futian want to go there? Behind the crowd, Hua Qingqing's pretty eyes showed surprise. Could it be because of her? Jiayu knew about her, so Yi Futian probably knew too, which was why he wanted to travel to the Western world. The Western world is the safest as well, relatively speaking, Yi Futian said. He had never had a conflict with the Western world before, and no one knew about his existence there. Of course, other than going out there to experience the world, it was partly because of Hua Qingqing. The cultivators nodded. Yi Futian does need to travel far this time. Master, I'll go too, Xiaomuyu said. And me. Dou Zhao and the others spoke up as well. They all wanted to follow Yi Futian. We don't need this many people for the trip this time. It will make us a big target, and that will make the affair rather dangerous. You guys should focus on cultivating and raising your power level to reach the peak of the Renhuang Plain as soon as possible. Yi Futian rejected their request. He didn't plan on taking a lot of people with him. Uncle Tai and I shall follow you. We can look after you, Old Ma said. Uncle Tai would be good enough. With Hua Jiayu and my current cultivation level, it's actually already sufficient. Qingqing wants to follow us. That's why we would need some extra help, Yi Futian said. Old Ma didn't say more. Yi Futian and Hua Jiayu's levels were indeed stronger than anybody else's now. Then I'll follow you guys back to the village. I haven't seen Little Ling for so long, Old Ma said. Yeah, Little Ling, Fang Xiyuan, and the other kids. They are probably all grown up by now. With the master teaching them cultivation, they're probably all pretty strong now. Yi Futian smiled as he said, I'll go too. It was Chen Yi. Yi Futian looked toward him. Chen Yi's cultivation level was similar to his, so it wouldn't be a problem. Since we're traveling far, before heading to the Western world, could you accompany me somewhere first? Chen Yi asked Yi Futian. It was the first time he had spontaneously asked Yi Futian to go there. Sure. Yi Futian nodded without having too many queries. He asked, Where do you want to go? Divine Prefecture, Great Bright Domain, Chen Yi answered. Great Bright Domain! A sense of astonishment appeared in Yi Futian's eyes. He turned toward Chen Yi and asked, You came from the Great Bright Domain? Chen Yi cultivated the way of light. Based on that, it was indeed possible that he had come from the Great Bright Domain. The Great Bright Domain was one of the 18 domains of the Divine Prefecture. However, this domain was unique in that it had an exceptionally glorious history. It was mysterious and ancient. But now, it was said to be the most decrepit domain in the Divine Prefecture. The Great Bright Domain had been ravaged by time to the point that it didn't even have a ruler-class organization. But looking into history, the Great Bright Domain was once the most glorious domain in the Divine Prefecture. Of course, back then, it wasn't even known as the Divine Prefecture. Instead, it was known as the Divine Bright Domain. Chen Yi wanted to go to the Great Bright Domain. Thank you. Chen Yi thanked Yi Futian. He appeared to be rather serious. Yi Futian immediately understood that this was likely one of Qin Yi's secrets. While he looked like he didn't take anything seriously, he was likely hiding dark secrets deep down. But why did he venture into the Donghua domain back then? When are you departing? Lord Taishan asked. In a few days. I'll visit my teachers and leave a clone of my consciousness before leaving. Would you please continue with your cultivation? There is no need to worry about me, Yi Futian said. It wasn't a huge deal, so there was no need to be so solemn. After he had made proper arrangements, he would leave straight away. The cultivators nodded, then Yi Futian rose into the air and flew into the starry skies as a magnificent divine light erupted from him. Afterward, the stars shined as many of Yi Futian's projections appeared. Amongst them was a projection of him sitting in a cross-legged stance under the starry sky. He looked tranquil. It was as if he were merging with the starry sky. All these years, no one came to disturb him because no one dared to do so. Yi Futian was able to control the celestial stars of the skies and borrow the will of the great emperor in battle. He was basically invincible in this segmentum, so who would be so bold to come for him? But now that he was leaving, naturally, he had to make some preparations for the unpredictable. After all, he didn't know how many years this trip would take. This wasn't just traveling far in the conventional sense. He was crossing the entire world. Chapter 2407, for Youngsters. After Yi Futian left the Ziwei segmentum, starlight encircled the entire segmentum. If one watched the segmentum from far away in the endless space, it would be as though the whole segmentum was shrouded in starlight. Years ago, the Ziwei segmentum was sealed inside a rock. When the seal was broken, it formed this segmentum. Before Yi Futian left, he sealed the segmentum once again using Ziwei the Great's powers and left a clone of his consciousness inside the segmentum to control the power of the seals so it wouldn't get broken easily. Even if the seal were attacked, it would be as firm as a mountain. Only after he had done that did Yi Futian leave, feeling at ease. It was as if the whole ordeal in the original realm was unrelated to him. At that moment, he stood outside of the whole thing. At the Shangqing domain, Four Corner Village had become a flourishing holy land in the area. Some say that inside the mysterious village of Four Corner City lived a great emperor, the master of Four Corner Village. When the rumor broke out, the entire Shangqing domain erupted, and its influence even spread to the divine prefecture. Countless cultivators came to seek their paths from the master and wanted to enter the village. In a tavern inside Four Corner City, many cultivators had appeared here. Atop the tavern building, 4 young cultivators were chatting around an elegant stone table. All 4 of them exuded extraordinary temperaments. Below them, several people were standing in respect. There were even several among them who were of higher cultivation levels than the 4. One of the 4 young cultivators with short hair spoke. You can stop wasting time on us. Master won't be taking on any more students. However, since Four Corner Village had surfaced before the world, as long as you are willing to become a part of the village and focus on cultivation, you might be able to see the master someday if your performance stands out from the rest. After speaking, he released a deep sigh and sighed. Every year when they came out from the village, the same thing would happen. These people didn't want to follow the rules and become the village's external force, yet they wanted to meet the master to seek paths. How was that possible? Third brother, there is no need to answer them. An extraordinarily handsome young man with long hair said. He picked up his glass and took a sip of wine. He was enjoying himself. The sarcasm in his gaze was clear as he looked toward those standing beside them. All of these people were desperate to seek results. Everyone knew what they were thinking, and he never bothered paying attention to them. Yeah. All these years, masters only taught us. What gives them the right to be accepted? The only girl among the 4 cultivators asked softly. She looked graceful and dazzling, and her aura was similarly extraordinary. Only the dark, short-haired young cultivator sat in silence. He seemed like a quiet person. Who's that? Just then, the long-haired young cultivator suddenly turned and looked into the distance. A golden divine light flashed past his eyes. The next moment, a figure appeared before the 4 of them. Instantly, all 4 of them stood up, which surprised all of the cultivators in the tavern. Who was this person? It's Blind Tai, someone said softly. Blind Tai was really famous back in the day. Now, he had returned, and his aura was seriously powerful. Dad! The short-haired teen who was addressed as third brother exclaimed. He was the son of Blind Tai, Tai too. He was the little boy who had liked to follow Little Ling back then. The long-haired handsome youth was Fang Xiyuan, and the only girl was Little Ling. The quiet short-haired teen was the kid who was used to being forgotten in the village, Duoyu. Now they had all grown up. Uncle Tai. Fang Xiyuan and Little Ling revealed surprised expressions as they stood up. Only Duoyu stood still in silence. Come with me, Blind Tai said before he flew into the air. All four of the cultivators trailed behind him and flew toward the sky. Before long, they saw the four people waiting in front. The silver hair of the person in the middle fluttered in the wind. Excitement appeared on the faces of the four young cultivators. They accelerated and flew before Futian. Fang Xiyuan and Little Ling rushed up and called out to him with big smiles on their faces. Master, you're back! Master! Tai Tu scratched his head a little as a candid smile appeared on his face. Only Duoyu didn't move, he stood where he was. He bowed toward Futian and greeted him. Master! Futian had to take a second look before he could recognize the four of them. The kids were now all grown up. The four young cultivators were overjoyed to see him, but the way they expressed it was somewhat different. Perhaps it was because of their personalities. Fang Xiyuan was probably the most lively and playful one. Futian knocked on Fang Xiyuan's head and rubbed Little Ling's head. He then looked at Tai Tu, who had a smile that looked a little silly. All four of them seemed to have the same personality from when they were children. Duoyu, no need to be like this when you see me, Futian said when he saw that Duoyu was still bowing. Duoyu was the most pitiful kid among the four. As an orphan, he ate from the tables of all the families in the village, and no one had cared for him. Yes, master. Duoyu nodded before standing up straight and looking at Futian. There was a special light in his gaze as he looked at Futian. After all, his life had been changed by Futian. Although the two of them didn't spend that much time together, little Duoyu, who grew up eating from other families' tables, only he knew what Futian appearing back then meant for him. Fourth brother, no need to be so demure with master. Just act natural, Fang Xiyuan said, laughing a little. Futian looked at him and said, What's this? You guys ranked each other? Master, we're all your students. Of course we need to know who's the most senior and who's the most junior. I'm big brother, Little Ling is the second sister, Tai Tu is the third brother, and Duoyu is the youngest, so he's the fourth brother, Fang Xiyuan said. Futian looked at him and shook his head, though he felt warmth in his heart. This reminded him of his days cultivating in the cottage. He was the most junior back then, and all his older brothers and sisters in the cottage cared for him the most. Master, who are these two goddesses? Little Ling had been paying attention to Hua Jieyu and Hua Qingqing all along. Little Ling paid special attention to Hua Jieyu, who stood closely beside the master, which made her guess Hua Jieyu's identity, but she couldn't be sure. This was because back then, when Futian came to the village, it was with another person. This is your masteress, and this is a friend of mine. Her name is Hua Qingqing, Futian said, smiling. Little Ling was startled for a moment before a sweet smile appeared on her face as she said, It's Little Ling's pleasure to meet masteress. You're really pretty, just like a goddess. And Hua, you too. Since when did you start talking so sweetly? Futian said. A gentle smile appeared on Hua Jieyu's face as she complimented. Little Ling is pretty too. Thank you, masteress, Little Ling replied, smiling sweetly. Student Fang Xiyuan. It's a pleasure to meet masteress. Student Tai Tu. Pleasure to meet masteress. Student Duoyu. It is a pleasure to meet masteress. The other three also greeted Hua Jieyu. They were much more serious than when they saw Futian. No need to be so serious. Just treat me like you would your master, Hua Jieyu said, smiling. She felt the respect that the youngsters had for Yi Futian. Masteress is right. There is no need to act so restrained, Yi Futian said. Let's go back to the village. Yes. Everyone nodded before the group flew into the sky. Before long, they had returned to the four-corner village. The villagers were all thrilled to see Yi Futian return. As they walked into the village, Little Ling asked, Master, why didn't Grandpa come back? Grandpa felt at ease with Master taking care of you guys, so he wanted to stay there and work hard to raise his cultivation level in order to protect you in the future. Yi Futian replied and then smiled. Little Ling curled her lips and said, Master, I'm not a little girl anymore. I'm a Renhuang too now. A 30-year-old Renhuang, that was indeed outrageous. Yet all four of the young cultivators were Renhuangs, 100% authentic Renhuangs. However, their cultivation processes were unique. They were born with paths naturally, fostered by the Great Path, and taught from young by the Master. From infancy, their cultivation contained the natural will of the path, which greatly accelerated their pace of cultivation and allowed them to reach their current level today. There were no shortcuts to cultivation, however, there were indeed unique individuals in the world. From this, it could be seen what Muyun Shu from the Muyun family in Four Corner Village had missed. Back then, Muyun Shu was the leader of the kids in the village. After the incident, the master, who was once just a teacher for basic knowledge, started teaching cultivation to Little Ling and the other three. Master is truly a once-in-a-lifetime figure. Yi Futian sighed and sighed as the group reached the private school. Master. Yi Futian bowed slightly. Come in, said a voice from inside. The group walked inside to the courtyard. Master was sitting there quietly, and his gaze passed over Yi Futian, Hua Jiayu, Hua Qingqing, and Chen Yi. You're all not simple, he said softly. Yi Futian looked at Jiayu, Chen Yi, and Huang Qingqing, who was beside him. Not simple? Jiayu had the great emperor's inheritance on her. Hua Qingqing's origins were indeed not simple. Chen Yi held some secrets as well. Did the master see through all of that? Do you have something to do, returning to the village this time? Master asked Yi Futian. Master, we came to say goodbye and also to see the kids, Yi Futian said. We are planning to make a trip to the Western world. Before that, we're also going to the Great Bright Domain. That's good. Master nodded. Rather than being trapped in the original realm, it may be good to put everything down and experience the outside world far, far away. You've only been to a few places thus far, so the Western world is a pretty good choice. Master, we want to go too, Fang Xiyuan said. Yeah. Little Ling and Tai Tu nodded as well. Duo Yu also looked toward Yi Futian. It seemed that he was looking forward to it too. Yi Futian looked toward the four of them. Just as he was about to reject them, Master said, These four youngsters have already learned what they have to learn, yet they haven't gone outside Four Corner City before. It is indeed time for them to go outside. You should bring them along. The four were all Renhuang plain cultivators, yet they were all naive and simple. Their hearts were pure, and their personalities were as clean as blank pieces of paper. But it was precisely because of this that they had been able to move forward all this while and reach their current standing. Now, Master thought that it was time for them to head out. As Yi Futian heard Master say so, he hesitated, then nodded and said, All right. The four were all Renhuang plain cultivators. They would be considered powerful cultivators outside, so he didn't need to worry much about that. Not to mention, Blind Tai would be there too, so he could take care of them as well. It wouldn't be a bad idea to bring them out and experience the world. Chapter 2408, Qin Yi's Secret. The Divine Prefecture was boundless and vast and held an infinite numbers of continental plates. The Great Bright Domain was the highest domain inside the Divine Prefecture other than the Imperial City. Located on the east side of the Divine Prefecture, it was a domain that was somewhat peculiar among all 18 domains. Because of its history, the Great Bright Domain was shrouded in mystery and was a destination to explore for many cultivators. Furthermore, compared to other domains in the Divine Prefecture, today's Great Bright Domain had the smallest footprint as a majority of its territory had been divvied up by the other surrounding domains. It was no longer part of the existing Great Bright Domain. Some even claimed that the Great Bright Domain should have never existed. Therefore, so many years later, the so-called Great Bright Realm, in fact, was only a single continent. This one remaining continent was what the world referred to as the Great Bright Realm today, which was also called the Great Bright City. A domain was a city. Naturally, this city was vast and had a mystical allure. According to legend, the Great Bright City was actually the Bright Temple, and the entire city was the grounds of the Bright Temple. This was the reason that so many years later, the Great Bright City was shrouded in light and seemed to contain the power of light. However, the light was everywhere. Many people had been exposed to the light since the day they were born. It was precisely because it was everywhere that it was more difficult to capture and comprehend. In addition to being born with this kind of ability, the vast majority of the cultivators in the world were unable to perceive the great path of light, let alone comprehend it. Qinyi was the only expert in the method of light that Futian had ever seen all these years. In the Divine Prefecture, the vast majority of those who cultivated the method of light were in the Great Bright City. This was the most suitable place for cultivating the power of light, but it was also the least suitable place for anyone who cultivated and comprehended other great paths. At this time, in the void outside the Great Bright Domain, a group of people was traveling through the void between the clouds and the mists. There were 9 people altogether in this group. Under them was a flying boat flashing with golden light. It contained a mighty spatial power of the Great Path. It took them shuttling through the space constantly, moving through the clouds and mist. These 9 were none other than Futian and his entourage. Futian, Hua Jieyu, Hua Qingqing, Chen Yi, Blind Tai, and 4 other youngsters, including Fang Xiyuan. Almost there. At this time, on the flying boat, Chen Yi spoke up while still looking into the distance. He had always been somewhat of a jokester. He appeared sober and serious right now as he watched the brilliant light that was falling from the sky far away. No wonder it's called the Great Bright Field, Futian whispered. The light came down from the firmament, and it was visible to the naked eye. It was something extremely magical. It was enough to distinguish that continent from other areas. It seemed as if it was an independent world of its own. No one had any idea what kind of force was capable of causing such a vision. Are you from here? Futian asked Chen Yi, who was next to him. Chen nodded. I grew up here when I was a child. The light falling from the sky can make one perceive the power of light much more clearly. I have been able to perceive the existence of light since I was a child, and this type of light was nurturing to my body. That explains the illumining body of the great path you possessed. Futian looked at Chen Yi and continued. So, who are you? Obviously, Chen Yi was more than he appeared. Who am I? Chen Yi smiled, a little self-deprecating. That blind man said that I was born to be extraordinary, but I never felt anything close to it myself. For many years, I have been accustomed to being alone by myself. I'm nothing special. Chen Yi's statement revealed a lot to Futian. It seemed that Chen Yi was someone with a story. Then, why did you go to the Dongwang domain? Futian asked out of curiosity. The Great Bright Domain was actually quite a ways away from the Dongwang domain. Chen Yi had gone over there in the early phases of becoming a renhuang for unknown reasons. Because someone asked me to go. Chen Yi smiled and said, watching the area where bright lights were sprinkling down. Futian didn't quite understand what he meant. Did someone ask him to go? Who was it that had asked Chen Yi to go to the Dongwang domain? It didn't seem that he had achieved any major feats in the Dongwang domain. Instead, he ended up escaping with him later and came along all this way. But Chen Yi didn't seem to want to continue discussing this topic. He was still looking into the distance when he suddenly asked, Do you believe in fate? Futian looked pensive when he heard Chen Yi's question. Fate? Why would Chen Yi ask him that? To a certain extent. Futian nodded and continued. When I was a teenager, I knew an astrologer who was able to glimpse into the future. Not really, Chen Yi said. His eyes moved away and redirected on Futian. He smiled. However, even if I don't much believe it, I still want to try it. I don't understand, Futian said. He didn't really understand what Chinny meant by that. Perhaps you will later, Chinny smiled and said. As for now, I can't tell you. Futian looked slightly puzzled. He felt that today Chinny seemed to be speaking in riddles. His words were not transparent at all. What kind of secret was Chinny hiding? What was it that he wanted to say? The flying boat was still moving forward, shuttling through the void. Although they could see the place of light from afar, they were, in fact, still quite a distance away from there. The light scattered upon the world, covering the great bright domain, rendering it much brighter than they ever imagined possible. Therefore, even though they could see it, they were actually still very far away. After a while, the flying boat broke through the clouds and mist, and finally came to the great bright domain. In the void, there was no mist or clouds, only the light that shone from the infinite source. Futian stretched out his hand, and he could see the light shining on his hand with his naked eyes. This world was much brighter than any place he had ever been. When the light was shining on his body, he could feel something miraculous. Probably it was exactly as Chinny had described. Someone could only be born with this kind of light power. Where are we going? Futian asked Chinny. This great bright domain used to be just a city, but it was, in fact, the territory of the Bright Temple. In this city, it was rumored that the ruins of the Bright Temple are there, and that's where we are heading. Chinny said. Keep going. I will give you directions. Do the ruins of the Bright Temple really exist? Futian said with some doubt. If so, how many people came here over the years to try to find the ruins of the Bright Temple? Are you asking me? Chinny shrugged and said, But you are right. Over the years, there have been many people who came in search of its ruins. Even the domain chief's manor guarding the great bright domain was built close to the ruins for obvious reasons. However, no one has ever succeeded in finding the ruins, so who knows whether it exists or not. Then, why did you ask me to come here with you? Futian asked, and this question seemed to touch the heart of the matter at hand. Chinny looked at him and smiled. Because somebody believes in it. Chapter 2409 Blind Chin. To the east of the great bright city, there was the land of the ruins. This area was fairly large, and people often came to explore it. At the far end of the ruins there was a door. From the other side of the door, it was clear that some light seemed to be coming through the cracks, illuminating the ruins. This door was rather interesting. It was transparent in nature, but behind the door, there seemed to be more ruins. It was as if a small world existed beyond this door. Some had walked through that door before, but many who had walked through that door were blinded by the light inside. Some also tried to destroy the door but found they were unable to do so. Some of these people who tried were incredibly powerful, but all to no avail. Perhaps, because of the peculiarity of this door, many were convinced that these ruins were once the site of the Bright Temple. According to the legends, this door was called the Portal of Light. It had been said that all those in the temple must walk through it to experience the baptism of the light before they could become a part of the Bright Temple. Around the site of these ruins, many cultivators were gathering. However, in the many years that had gone by, these ruins had been explored over and over again, searched every which way possible. Any treasures that had once existed, no doubt, had long disappeared many, many years ago. If it weren't for that door, no one would even entertain the notion that this was the site of the Bright Temple. Even so, in the great bright city, fewer and fewer people believed in it. On the contrary, this seemed to affirm the beliefs in a few very powerful principalities, and it was them that had been guarding and waiting in the surrounding area of the ruins. There was only this one city inside the great bright domain, and the top forces in the great bright city spread out from the site of the ruins around the general area. It could be said that these dilapidated ruins were the absolute center of the great bright city. At this time, on the remains of these ruins were several young men and women with extraordinary temperaments standing there, looking at the portal of light. "Does this door really lead to the light?" a woman whispered. Her body was surrounded by a halo of great path brilliance, indicating that she was in existence in the Renhuang realm. "Who knows? But that's what the elders have always said, so it must be true," The young man next to her replied solemnly. Perhaps they were wrong. The woman shook her head. In the past few years, the original realm has changed drastically, attracting cultivators from all over the world. Countless from the 18 domains of the Divine Prefecture have gone to the original realm. There are even rumors that the changes between heaven and earth started in the original realm. Only the Great Bright City seems to have been isolated from everyone else in the Divine Prefecture. What's the point of guarding these ruins just because of something that the blind man said? Unless, of course, because the elders really believe that one day the Bright Temple will reappear here again. At least the blind man from Chen's garden believes in it deeply. A slightly older cultivator next to them added. He appeared to be around 30 years or so, and there was a divine aurora hidden within his eyes. Can blind Chen's words be trusted? The woman looked dumbfounded. Everyone in the Great Bright City has always said that blind Chen is blind but can see the light. Just what is so special about him that so many people believe in what he said? As a blind man, can he really see the light? Maybe. At least for these many years, no one in the Great Bright City has ever touched blind Chen, and they all hold a certain respect for him. I do not know why, but those able cultivators must have their reasons. The person next to her joined in. A look of disdain flashed through the woman's eyes, and there was some arrogance on her face. The original realm is the center of impending changes between heaven and earth, but the elders don't care one bit. Just a word from blind Chen and the entire Great Bright City will be destroyed by the ruins. The woman's tone was mocking. She glanced at the portal of light ahead and said, Since the elders won't, I will ask blind Chen myself whether his words are true or not. The people then looked at her, and they could see a hint of pride on her face. They all knew that the woman had wanted to go to the original realm when she heard that many top figures of the world had embarked on a journey there. These cultivators of the 18 domains in the Divine Prefecture and other cultivators from other worlds had uncovered many relics in the land of the original realm, all of which were events that she greatly desired to witness. But because of something blind Chen said 20 years ago, the entire Great Bright City fell into a state of suspense, and no one dared to leave. Everybody stayed to guard and watch the ruins. No one ever questioned his words. But today, she wanted to ask him. How could a blind man see the light? Don't be hasty. The person next to her exhorted. If they can, the elders must have done it a long time ago. Everyone in the Great Bright Domain believes in it, so there must be a reason. So the light will descend, and the divine relic will reappear? The woman smiled sarcastically with a degree of contempt. Something blind Chen said 20 years ago was why the cultivators of the Great Bright Domain waited for over 2 decades, including her own family. Because of it, they had missed the grand occasion at the original realm. At this time, in the void not far away was a flying boat, floating there silently, not disturbing anybody. Futian and the others stood on top of the flying boat and glanced at the ruins ahead. He then put away the flying boat implement. These must be the ruins of the Great Bright Temple that Chinny was speaking of, he decided silently. He didn't expect that the place would be so broken that only a single door was left intact. However, this door seemed a little interesting as light was emitted from behind it, suggesting that there was a world hidden behind the door. Futian glanced at the woman speaking before them, then looked at Chinny next to him. But Chinny was expressionless. It was as if he hadn't heard anything the woman was saying. Futian remembered that on their way over, Chinny had mentioned that a blind man once told him that he was meant to be extraordinary. He wondered if the blind man named Chen that the woman was referring to was just a coincidence, or if the blind man they talked about were one and the same. 20 years ago? Futian thought. It was some 20 years ago when Chinny met him in the Donghua domain. That blind man is the same as he was before, fond of speaking nonsense, Chinny said in a low voice with a cold expression in his eyes. He seemed to be full of contempt for the blind man he referred to. As if they had heard what he said, those few people in the front turned to look at them. They could feel that Futian and his party were unusual. The woman smiled and said, You too think that blind man was an impostor? Chinny looked at the woman and asked, Who are you? Lin Shi of the Lin family, the woman said. The Lin family? Chen glanced at the woman with indifference in his eyes and said, I can chastise that blind man, but who the heck are you? You! The woman's expression altered slightly as coldness shot out from her eyes. Futian was also caught by surprise. It seemed that what Chen said was different from what he thought. Chapter 24:10 The Blind Man Welcomes a Guest. When Chinyi was talking about the blind man, he did not seem to mind. However, when he heard other people hurling insults at the blind man, his attitude immediately changed. It was clear that he still respected Blind Chen very much. Futian was curious about the identity of Blind Chen and what his relationship with Chen Yi was. Lin Shi from Lin Clan glanced over at Chen Yi. There was a cold look in her eyes. She walked towards where Chen Yi was. The youths beside her also looked towards Futian's group. They had not seen these people before. They probably weren't cultivators from the top forces of Great Bright City. There was only one city in the Great Bright Domain. The strongest forces were all in this region. This was different from other domains. The members of the local forces had seen each other before and could recognize each other at a glance. However, they did not recognize any of these people. Who are you? Asked Lin Shi as she gave Chen Yi an indifferent look. Chen Yi swept a cold and arrogant glance at her and replied, You are not worthy of knowing. The expression of the group of cultivators of the Lin clan changed slightly. Although these people had yet to unleash their auras, and they could not sense their overall cultivation levels, this group of cultivators had extraordinary temperaments. They should be very powerful. Otherwise, the members of the Lin clan would have already attacked Futian's group. Even so, their Lin clan was still a top force of Great Bright City. This person was putting on airs and looked down on other people. Wasn't he being too presumptuous? A slightly older youth from the Lin clan flicked the hair on his forehead. The aura of the Great Path flowed around his body. He was actually a 6th-tier middle-level Renhuang. His aura was astonishing. The domineering aura permeated the space as it swept towards Futian and his group. He said, In Great Bright City, no one is too mighty to be known by the cultivators of the Lin clan. After he said this, a powerful aura of the Great Path burst forth from his body. Invisible sword will circulated in the space, causing a killing intent to loom over the surroundings. The formless sword will was everywhere. Futian and his group could sense it clearly. With such a short distance between the two parties, the cultivator could launch an attack at them with a mere thought. You better not attack, warned Chen Yi as he cast a glance at the youth. He still had not unleashed his aura of the Great Path. Arrogance flashed in his eyes as though he was looking down on that cultivator of the Lin clan. It seemed like he did not take the other party seriously. Chen Yi's attitude caused the pressure of the aura of the Great Path unleashed by the cultivator of the Lin clan to increase. The formless sword will howled impatiently as though it would erupt at any second. His gaze was dead fixed on Chen Yi as his palm extended forward slightly. He wanted to attack, but he was a little fearful of Chen Yi's overbearing confidence. The space appeared exceptionally suppressive at the moment. A few other cultivators of the Lin clan also unleashed their wills. They stared at the group before them intently. Even though Chen Yi had not said much, his demeanor was presumptuous. He clearly did not take the Lin clan seriously. Chen Yi was not the only reason the youth was holding himself back from attacking. The gaze of the white-haired youth beside Chen Yi was too calm. This calmness originated from unwavering confidence. There was also the blind man who stood behind them. He was merely standing there quietly, but his presence alone was enough to suppress the others. This group of people was most likely a powerful foreign troop. Since the group refused to unleash their auras of the Great Path, the youth had no way of figuring them out. Buzz! Right at this moment, a beam of light shot up to the sky somewhere in the distance. The light was actually more brilliant than any other lights in the heavens and the earth. It was akin to a light that could illuminate heaven itself. This scene caused the cultivators who had gathered here to reveal surprised expressions. All of them looked in that direction. It's from Old Street, someone mumbled. That's where Blind Chen lives, another person whispered. What was going on? Soon, another beam of light shot towards where they had come from. It was like a bridge made of light that extended all the way here from Old Street. The light shone on the ground. Aside from where they were, there seemed to be similar lights shining on other locations. At this moment, in Great Bright City, many cultivators from the large clans raised their heads and looked in the direction where the lights were shining. They expanded their wills and soon figured out the source of these beams of light. The blind man was welcoming a guest. Somewhere, a middle-aged cultivator commanded with a deep and rich voice, "Go and find out who is the guest that Blind Chin is welcoming." One by one, cultivators rose into the sky from various locations in Great Bright City. They were all rushing towards the same destination. Over at the ruins, Chinny looked in the direction where the light came from and mumbled, "It's Blind Chin." After he said this, he ignored the cultivators from the Lin clan and left immediately. He moved towards where the light came from by traversing across the sky. Yi Futian and his group naturally followed after Chinny. The cultivators from the Lin clan watched them leave and still did not attack. "Our clan members will most likely head over there too. Let's go and check it out," the leader of their group said. Lin Chi's gaze was cold as he continued to stare in the direction where Yi Futian and his group had gone. Old Street of Great Bright City was a narrow alley. An old mansion stood there. It appeared somewhat shabby, but it was still quite clean and tidy. A rather famous figure in Great Bright City resided in this mansion. He was Blind Chin. Some people crowned him Chin the Diviner. Chin the Diviner had never revealed his cultivation in front of anyone. No one knew his cultivation plane. He was just like any other ordinary, old blind man. However, rumor has it that he had been living for many years. This set him apart from other people. The mighty figures in Great Bright City respected Blind Chin because his appearance remained the same throughout the years. He looked exactly the same now as he did when those mighty figures were still in their youths. Rumor has it that Blind Chin was a mighty astrologer. He could read fortunes and pry into the past and the future. However, this rumor had yet to be verified. No one could tell for sure whether or not it was true. It was because Blind Chin had never read anyone's fortune before. Throughout the years, many people sought him for fortune-telling, but he refused to even meet them. Some people claimed that he did not dare to reveal God's design for fear of dying early. Yet, more than 20 years ago, Blind Chin once said that light would descend upon them, the divine relic would appear once again. The people of Great Bright City treated Blind Chin's words as a prophecy. Since then, various major clans and forces stationed in the city had never left this place before. Even when the original realm went through huge changes and the cultivators in the Divine Prefecture were called to assemble, they chose to remain here. They were all waiting for the prophecy to be fulfilled. They had waited for more than 20 years. Some people asked Blind Chin about the prophecy before, but he didn't respond to them. After so many years, more and more people were suspicious about the validity of the prophecy. One of them was Lin Chi from the Lin clan. She did not believe in Blind Chin at all. In her opinion, he had deceived the crowd with a lie, causing them to miss out on an opportunity. She believed that opportunities awaited in the original realm. However, fortune and misfortune were two sides of the same coin. How many people had actually managed to obtain fateful encounters in the original realm? The seniors in Great Bright City most likely had their own considerations too. However, after more than 2 decades, the old mansion inhabited by Blind Chin finally showed signs of activity again. Currently, a beam of light shot up to the clouds from inside the old mansion. The door of the mansion was wide open. Beams of light radiated outward as though they were paving paths of light. Cultivators from all corners of the city arrived at the mansion by following the light trails. Was the prophecy he proclaimed more than 2 decades ago true or false? Chapter 24:11 An Honorable Guest? Cultivators gradually gathered in front of the old mansion. These cultivators all had extraordinary temperaments and were disciples from large clans. The Great Bright Domain was called the Divine Bright Domain in the past. It had passed its heyday and had now become one of the weaker domains among the 18 domains of the Divine Prefecture. Moreover, the domain only consisted of one city. However, due to its glorious past, there were still quite a number of powerful forces residing in the current Great Bright Domain. The blind man has opened his doors, commented someone. At Old Street, many people stared at the light that was still radiating outwards from within the wide open doors. Their hearts trembled. Throughout the years, the doors were shut most of the time. Now, the doors were open. Who was the guest that Blind Chen was about to receive? Was this related to the prophecy that he proclaimed 20 years ago? In the sky above Old Street, many silhouettes appeared. Their gazes landed on the old mansion too. These cultivators who had just arrived were people from different factions. They each occupied a spot in the sky. Futian and his group arrived as well. They stood in the sky above Old Street as they observed the mansion. Futian cast a glance at Qin, who was beside him. Judging from Qin's response, he was most likely acquainted with Blind Chen. Moreover, their relationship was special. Was the beam of light that shot out from this mansion related to Qin? As expected, Channy looked towards the inside of the mansion with a conflicted look. He said with a low voice, "Blind man, I'm back. Is this your home?" Futian asked softly. Qin revealed a puzzled expression. Home? Did he have one? Who knows? Qin had been calling him Blind Man since he was young. However, he was indeed raised by Blind Chen. "I'll go in and take a look first," Qin said to Futian and the rest. "Go ahead," Futian said while nodding. He was aware that Qin had a special relationship with the owner of this mansion. Alone, Qin walked forward and entered the doors. Immediately, countless gazes landed on him. The crowd revealed strange expressions. Someone asked right away, "Who is he?" The various cultivators revealed puzzled looks. They were not sure, they had not seen this person before. Qin entered the old mansion. Nothing happened after he entered. This caused the crowd to reveal even more bizarre expressions. Blind Chen actually allowed people to enter the mansion just like that. Many years ago, Blind Chen once took in a youth. The youth was dressed in rags and was filthy. However, Blind Chen still took good care of him. Do you all still remember this? Just then, a middle-aged man said this as he stood in the sky. A few elderly cultivators nodded and said, "That's right. Back then, there was also a rumor that someone saw light coming from the body of the filthy youth." That's right. In different locations, one by one, people began recalling that there had been such a youth before. Someone claimed, "I saw it with my own eyes before. I still remember that when I saw the light on his body back then, I was astonished. After that, I never saw him again. He seemed to have been hidden away by Blind Chen." Down below, the group from the Lin clan also arrived. Lin Shi personally saw Qin enter the mansion. She immediately understood why Qin had such a huge reaction just now. So, he actually already knew Blind Chen and was raised by him. From the looks of it, the youth was Qin without a doubt. Lin Shi lifted her head and looked in one direction. She discovered that the cultivators of the Lin clan had also arrived. Her group took to the sky and walked over to where the ladder was. She then informed the seniors in a low voice about what had transpired before their arrival. "Father, does the clan actually believe that Blind Chen can see the light and predict the future?" asked Lin Shi incredulously. Her father shook his head and answered, "No one knows. However, there is indeed more to Blind Chen than meets the eye. He has lived in Great Bright City for many years. When I was young, Blind Chen was already as he is now, and he is still around today. Cultivators do have very long lifespans. What's so strange about that?" asked Lin Shi. "Once one reaches the Renhuang Plain, they will live as long as the heavens and the earth." "Maybe," the middle-aged man replied indifferently. Lin Shi lowered her head and glanced down below. She then said, "All the cultivators in the Great Bright Domain have wasted more than 20 years because of what he said. Until now, we are still waiting. I don't understand." When the middle-aged man heard what she said, he looked at the old mansion with a cold and indifferent gaze. What she said was true. After more than 20 years, where were the light and the divine relic? "Today, we need to get a straight answer from Blind Chen," he said in a low voice. "What's the matter? Lin Kong, do you not trust the old diviner?" another middle-aged man said loudly as he looked at Lin Shi's father. This person was dressed in a long blue robe. He was tall and had exceptional cultivation. He simply stood there and gave off the airs of an authoritative figure. This person was the current family head of the Lan family, a top force of Great Bright City. He had powerful cultivation and was a Renhuang at his peak. It is not that I do not trust him. It is just that, after more than 20 years, the old diviner should give us an explanation, replied Lin Kong in a deep voice. You can ask the old diviner personally later, the Lan family head answered with a smile. In another location there stood a group of cultivators. They were adorned in long robes as red as flames. The mark of a red maple leaf was also carved on their bodies. Faint scorching currents of heat could be seen emanating from their figures. The leader of this group was a cultivator who appeared rather young. He was extraordinarily handsome, and his face was chiseled and well-defined. Although scorching heat currents were emanating from his body, he gave off a cold and arrogant air. He was Yu Ho from the Yu family. He was the cultivator with the most outstanding talent in the family. Aside from the sun flare, he also comprehended the method of light. Although he was just an eighth to Renhuang for now, the family head of the Yu family, who was Yu Ho's father, had already begun to let him handle family matters. In another location, there stood a group of cultivators dressed in white robes. Their temperaments were outstanding, giving off an otherworldly vibe. This group of people was not from a major family. They were from a sect, the only sect in Great Bright City. 7 Stars Mansion was established by a prominent figure many years ago. The chief of 7 Stars Mansion had unfathomable cultivation and rarely made an appearance in public. Even today, the 7 Stars Mansion chief was not here. His 7 disciples had come instead. They were the 7-star lords of 7 Stars Mansion. Each of them had very powerful cultivation. Their leader was currently the most exceptional cultivator in the sect, the head of the 7-star lords, 7 Night Star Lord. Lin Clan, Lan family, Yu family, and 7 Stars Mansion were currently the 4 strongest forces in Great Bright City. Of course, aside from them, several other forces had arrived. They were spread out across the region. However, they did not stand out as much as these 4 major forces. Since the old diviner has opened his doors to welcome a guest today, he will naturally solve the riddle that he left behind 20 years ago, said 7 Night Star Lord. The rest cast a glance at him and ignored his words. They continued to stare at the old mansion intently. Today, Blind Chin welcomed a guest by showering the entire Great Bright City with light. All of them wanted to know who exactly Blind Chin was waiting to receive. Just as the crowd was discussing the matter, 2 figures emerged from the old mansion. The surroundings fell silent immediately. Everyone had their gazes on the entrance. Then they saw 2 people emerging from the doors. One of them was Chin Yi, who had entered the mansion just now. The other person was blind and wore ragged clothes. He held a crutch in his right hand. He appeared no different than an ordinary, disabled old man. The crowd could not sense any aura from him. He was in his twilight years and looked like he would pass away at any moment. His long, white hair appeared somewhat unkempt. Besides that, he kept a long white beard. He looked as though he had not tidied his hair for years. With his appearance, he looked nothing like an erudite master. However, despite his shabby appearance, his body was squeaky clean. There was not even a single speck of dust on his ragged clothes. He was sloppy but not dirty. Greetings, old diviner. The heads of the Lin clan and Lan family were more polite. Even though they were standing in midair, they bowed slightly in the direction where Blind Chin appeared. However, Yu Ho and the 7-star lords from 7 Stars Mansion were not so courteous. Yu Ho stood there unbudgingly and said, "The old master has finally come out from seclusion. How can I not come out? There's an honorable guest arriving today." Blind Chin took a few steps forward with the help of his crutch before he finally said something. Even though his voice was not loud, everyone around could hear him clearly. "Is he related to the prophecy that you proclaimed 20 years ago?" asked Lin Kong, the head of the Lin clan. "Yes," replied Blind Chin. He actually admitted it right away. This caused the surrounding cultivators to turn serious. The guest was actually related to the prophecy. Furthermore, this was the first time Blind Chin validated any information related to the prophecy. From the looks of it, with the arrival of this extraordinary figure, the ruins of the bright temple might reveal itself once again. "Who is this honorable guest that you are referring to?" Lin Kong further inquired. Blind Chin held onto his crutch and continued to move forward in a certain direction. Everyone was observing where he was heading. Yi Futian still stood at his spot silently. When he saw Blind Chin moving towards him, he couldn't help but reveal an astonished expression. Was he the honorable guest that Blind Chin mentioned? Even though Yi Futian had just arrived here along with Chen Yi, based on the intel that he briefly gathered, Blind Chin was not an ordinary old man. Even the top Renhuangs here crowned Blind Chin as Chin the Diviner. A person like him had no reason to welcome Chen Yi's friend with such fanfare. Blind Chin even caused such a huge commotion with his exceptional hospitality. Moreover, Blind Chin mentioned that this guest was related to the prophecy. It was precisely because of this that Yi Futian felt somewhat strange. Something was off. Had Blind Chin been waiting for him? The things that Chen Yi said to him before this were also rather baffling. Why did he feel like his encounter with Chen Yi back then was not just a coincidence? Chapter 24:12 Catastrophe of Death. Blind Chin walked to Yi Futian. He was leaning on a cane. Although he was blind, he seemed to be able to see him somehow. When he was facing Yi Futian, Blind Chin put his hands together to greet him, and said, "The blind man welcomes you, my young friend." Yi Futian hurriedly returned the courtesy and responded, "You are too kind, sir." He didn't ask him why he was getting special treatment, as everyone's eyes were on them at this moment. It was neither the time nor place to ask any questions. At this time, all the cultivators around them were looking at them. Or rather, they were concentrating on Yi Futian. In the crowd, some of the older folks had lived for many years. Blind Chin had appeared the same for many years now. Moreover, Blind Chin was cold to everyone. Nobody had ever seen him give anyone this kind of treatment, welcoming someone personally. Now, an outsider had made Blind Chin step out of that old house and bow to greet him. Who was this white-haired young man? Furthermore, Blind Chin claimed that this had something to do with the prophecy. Could it be that this cultivator was the key to opening the relic of light? This man seemed to have come back with Chen Yi. Was it because Blind Chin had already foreseen it, so he had asked Chen Yi to find him? At this moment, everyone was full of curiosity about Yi Futian. "My young friend, you have come from afar. Please come to my humble abode to rest a while," Blind Chin said to Yi Futian in a polite and friendly tone. Obviously, Yi Futian could not possibly refuse such a gesture, so he nodded and said, "I would be more than happy to oblige." Blind Chin nodded. Then, almost as if he were making an announcement to those far away, he said, "Since there are distinguished guests here today, I don't have much time to entertain everyone, so that I won't keep you any longer. Please feel free to return to your homes at your convenience." With that said, he led the way with the help of the cane and walked in the direction of the old house. Chen Yi followed him but turned back to take a glance at Yi Futian. At this time, Yi Futian was still full of questions. However, he followed behind Blind Chin, figuring that he could ask questions later. Nonetheless, the many cultivators that had gathered around frowned. So, was he hoping to dismiss them just like that? Today, cultivators from all major principalities had come with a purpose. Now, with the emergence of a mysterious young man who may have something to do with the relic of light, they felt they must get to the bottom of the matter. At this moment, a ray of light came down, carrying a fiery current with it. It was Yu Ho. This unexpected presence stopped Blind Chin and the others dead in their tracks. When they looked to the sky above, they saw Yu Ho looking cold and arrogant as he looked down and said, "Who is this man, and what does he have to do with the ruins at the Temple of Light? How are we to interpret the prophecy? It is a rare occasion that drew all the cultivators from the great bright city here today. It is a perfect time for our questions to be answered. Yes, everyone is here today, so why don't you say a few words to let us know what is going on? And who is this young man in white?" Lin Kong, the head of the Lin family, added. How could they leave without some explanation from the blind man? "You will understand in the future. There's no rush." Blind Chen said lightly. After a brief pause, he continued moving forward without any intention of stopping. He did not intend to explain anything to anyone else. Watching him walking towards the old house, everyone around him frowned, displeasure in their eyes. When the light appeared today, the blind man came out to greet the guests but didn't even bother to speak to them before sending them on their way. At this time, a figure in the void descended from the sky, followed that beam of light, and landed above the old house. She simply stood there, watching Blind Chen and the others. "Lin Shi, don't be rude." In the void, the clan leader of the Lin family chastised her. However, next to Lin Shi, a few more people were descending as well. It was the same group of people that had quarreled with Chen and the others at the site of the ruins. However, the cultivators who descended later did not bother to stop Lin Shi but hovered and watched her. Obviously, they had some ideas of their own. These later generations of Renhuang were egotistical individuals who held themselves in high regard. They had never understood the tolerance the elders exhibited to a blind man. Today, they wanted to find out why, no matter the cost. Even though Lin Kong had chided them on the surface, he didn't order anyone to stop them. Obviously, he also had the thought of pushing the matter further. Blind Chen had overstepped his boundaries. For more than 20 years, he had never given them an explanation. "Elder is well known by all, and I heard that the Elder can predict the events of past and future, as well as prophesizing and predicting events not yet known. May I ask the Elder to predict my future today so I see for myself?" Lin Shi asked while looking at Blind Chen. Her words were respectful enough, but her tone was not all that kind. There was even a sharp sword will flowing upon her, as if it might break out of her body at any moment and attack Blind Chen. Blind Chen raised his head slightly and faced in Lin Shi's direction. Chen Yi took a step forward and said coldly, "Get back!" "Good." But at this moment, Blind Chen spat out something that puzzled Chen Yi to no end. He turned back to look at the blind man. "Good? What did that mean?" Lin Shi was taken aback as well. She looked at Blind Chen, not understanding at all what this word meant. "I predict that you will have a catastrophe today," pronounced Blind Chen. As soon as his voice faded, the surrounding space suddenly quieted. There seemed to be some hidden meanings in what he said. Lin Shi stared at Blind Chen as well. His eyes sharpened more than before. A cold voice came out saying, "I don't believe it. I know you don't believe it. It's precisely because you don't believe it that there is this catastrophe." Blind Chen continued in a calm voice and said, "Go back now and you might escape it. If you continue to persist, I am afraid there is no running away from this catastrophe." "What catastrophe?" Lin Shi took a step forward as the sword will flowing in the direction of Blind Chen shrouded him. "Catastrophe of death." Blind Chen's response was simple. Catastrophe of death. Was this a prophecy or a threat? Even the aura of those from the Lin family in the void suddenly chilled. Lin Kong, the clan leader of the Lin family, whose eyes contained that sword will of his, now directed towards Blind Chen who was below. Catastrophe of death? Hearing these words, anger emerged in his heart. "You exaggerate," Lin Kong said coldly. Suddenly, several cultivators from the Lin family stepped down and appeared all around Lin Shi, as if they understood the meaning of the words spoken by their clan leader. Although Blind Chen couldn't see clearly, his perception seemed to have seen everything. There was a self-deprecating smile on his face as he said, "Indeed, fate cannot be avoided after all." All the surrounding cultivators displayed a curious look. If Lin Shi died, would that count as a prophecy? Would it be the words of Blind Chen that lead to her death, or the prophecy itself? However, the cultivators from the Lin family didn't seem to believe it. A powerful aura came down, and the quiet space was becoming slightly suffocating. Lin Shi continued to move forward towards Blind Chen. However, from Blind Chen's perspective, this was fate. Chapter 24:13 The Coming of Catastrophe. Blind Chen did not move. He stood there, still leaning on the cane in his hand. Chen Yi didn't move either. He merely raised his head to look at Lin Shi, who had taken a few steps forward, stopping right on the edge of the old house. Close behind her in the sky above were cultivators from the Lin family, who were extraordinarily talented. Futian and the others stopped as well as they directed their attention forward. In this suppressed space, the sword will seem to escape into the invisible, hovering above Blind Chen and the others. Everyone's attention was on Blind Chen and Lin Shi. They wondered if she would actually do something. If Lin Shi were to make a move, what would be the outcome? No one knew if the outcome predicted by Blind Chen was technically a prophecy or not. Lin Kong was watching as well. Up until this moment, he hadn't stopped Lin Shi. However, the aura of the Great Path permeated from his body as his divine consciousness covered this area. He believed he could take action in a single moment. For cultivators at their level, this space was far too narrow, and they could easily cover it in a single thought, attacking from any direction, ultimately razing this entire area to the ground. Then try it. Lin Shi spat. His voice still held an incredible sense of cold arrogance. The moment her voice fell, an invisible sword will directed towards Blind Chen. This invisible sword will seem to meander in the void, which could not be detected by the naked eye. Nevertheless, the existence of the sword will was real enough. Finally, Lin Shi made her move. She was no longer able to resist the temptation of giving it a shot. Even though the man in front of her was the mysterious Blind Chen, she still had her disbelief. Today, she wanted to find out, once and for all, if this blind man had been deceiving everyone all along. But the moment she acted, Lin Shi saw a ray of light. The light was extremely dazzling. It bloomed right next to Blind Chen, stinging everyone's eyes. At this moment, she could not open her eyes, so she closed them tightly. She felt the whole world had turned into a world of light, which submerged everything in this space. She could not see anything except the light. Time seemed to slow down at this moment, and Lin Shi suddenly felt the breath of death. In this instant, countless thoughts burst into her mind, and there was shouting. "Get back!" the voice said. She heard it, but there was no time to react at all. In Lin Shi's world, there was only the light. The light occupied her entire world and swallowed up everything, including her body and her spiritual soul. At this moment, she realized that she had lost, after all. Blind Chen's prophecy had been fulfilled. Lin Shi's body disintegrated under the light, turning into countless dots of light in an instant. It was as if she had never existed. Not only were the cultivators behind her unable to save her in time, but they simply had no way of saving her either. In that instant, the light also invaded their worlds and occupied everything. When they could finally see the world outside clearly, Lin Shi's body had already turned into numerous spots of light, dissipating in front of their eyes. A figure appeared where Lin Shi was. It was Lin Kong. He stretched out his hand, trying to grasp something, but that spot of light evaporated in his palm, escaping his grasp. He had thought that he would be able to respond no matter what happened. But what had happened was so ruthless. No matter how fast the reaction, it could never be faster than the power of light. Under the light, Lin Shi was wiped out as if she had always been dust and smoke. How could he have stopped it? At such a close range, the light was shining upon them in an instant, and he was too slow. All he could do was watching his descendant disappear right before his eyes. As a matter of fact, just as Blind Chen had prophesied. It was the catastrophe of death. The power of light. The hearts of all the cultivators trembled. They all looked at the man who released the light. It was not the blind man but the young man next to him. This young man's appearance was not the most outstanding. But at this moment, there was a light shining upon his body. It was extremely dazzling. Chinyi, the young man raised by Blind Chen many years ago, had now returned. He had the body of light, and his cultivation was tyrannical. This was the aura of a Renhuang in the 8th realm, which was just a step away from the peak of Renhuang. Those cultivators from the Lin family who had clashed him in the ruins felt extremely apprehensive at the moment. Had they engaged with him in a fight then, they probably would have perished already. But at this moment, he had killed Lin Shi. "Does the clan leader of the Lin family believe in the prophecy I foretold?" Blind Chen said as Lin Kong turned to look at him. Prophecy? Did he consider this a prophecy? Of course it was. He predicted events that had not yet happened, but the young man next to him determined whether this prediction would become a reality. In fact, Lin Shi and the cultivators from the Lin family had always had a choice. Lin Kong could have stopped Lin Shi in time, or Lin Shi could have left instead of making her move. Then, would his prediction have failed? But there were no ifs now. The fact remained that his prediction had come true and Lin Shi was dead. Lin Kong stared at Chen Yi, holding back the grief and anger in his heart. At this moment, he could still maintain his sanity without taking direct action, demonstrating his tremendous self-control. The elder's reputation is well-deserved, even your disciple is outstanding. A Renhuan of the 8th realm at such young age, said Lin Kong. Not only did he not retaliate, but he kept his composure enough to give a compliment. Of course, the reason why he didn't retaliate was because of fear. A young man taught by Blind Chen had become a Renhuang in the 8th realm. So, what about Blind Chen himself? Was he really just a crippled old man? What if Blind Chen's cultivation was higher than his? If he made a move, the outcome would probably be no different than Lin Shi's, so he dared not act recklessly. He is not my disciple, Blind Chen replied. Whether or not he is a disciple of yours, he must have gotten this power of light from you, elder. Lin Kong probed tentatively. What are you doing, continuing to step on my roof? Blind Chen did not answer him but commented lightly. Lin Kong was silent. He looked in front and saw Blind Chen walking towards the old house with a cane, working his way towards him. The aura of the great path from Lin Kong enveloped this space, which was extremely oppressive, to say the least. However, Blind Chen seemed to have not perceived it, still moving forward slowly, approaching the old house with each step. In the meantime, Qin Yi's attention was focused solely on Lin Kong, who was above the old house. As for the cultivators who were here, besides being shocked by Qin Yi's strength, they were more curious about the identity of Yi Futian and those in his party. Qin Yi was raised by an old blind man, and he had returned to the great bright city many years later with spectacular strength. But who were Yi Futian and the others? Yi Futian and the others were the only distinguished guests who had compelled the old blind man to come out of that old house of his and welcome them in person. Were they invited by Qin Yi? If so, what realm was their cultivation level, and how were they related to the Temple of Light? These were all burning questions to them, but Blind Chen probably wouldn't give them any answers like they wanted. The light was still on Qin Yi, shooting out in the direction where Lin Kong was. Lin Kong could make his move in a single turning of the mind, and Qin Yi could do the same. In such a short distance, once the battle broke out, no one could predict what would happen. Previously, Lin Shi insisted on doing what she wanted to do, and it had killed her. As for Lin Kong, the clan leader of the Lin family, what would he do? In the area around the old house, everyone's eyes were fastened on Lin Kong. If he did not back off, what would happen? The sounds of the cane hitting the floor could be heard loud and clear. Blind Chen was getting closer to the old house. Lin Kong's focus was always ahead. Finally, he said, "Let's go." When his voice faded, Lin Kong levitated into the sky, taking the cultivators of the Lin family away through the air. After they left, Blind Chen stepped into the old house, and the door closed. Yi Futian and the others disappeared. But no one left, as they were still standing quietly in the distance. Lin Shi was killed, and Lin Kong, the head of the Lin family, would not drop the matter so readily. Perhaps Lin Kong was getting reinforcements, and would be back soon. People in the great bright city knew that among the 4 top principalities, the clan leaders of the 3 families were not necessarily the strongest characters. Within the families was also the existence of old monster-level figures who were the actual support these families relied upon. The matter this time probably wouldn't be resolved so easily. Chapter 24:14 The Person Behind the Scene. Yi Futian followed Blind Chen to the old house, which was simple, clean, and quite spacious. Blind Chen pointed at a chair with his cane and said to Yi Futian, "Sit down, young friend." "Sir, you first, please." Yi Futian gestured with his hand as the group took their seats in order. Yi Futian was full of questions at the moment, as he glanced at Qin Yi. Qin Yi was standing silently behind Blind Chen. He was obviously very reverent towards the blind man. Sir, there are some things that I don't understand. Futian started. My friend, you don't need to say anything more, I know. Blind Chen nodded slightly, and Futian did not pursue further, waiting for Blind Chen to continue. I've invited you here because I have a favor to ask you, my young friend, Blind Chen said to Futian. What favor? Futian asked. To help me open the relic of light left by the Temple of Light, said Blind Chen. Futian couldn't suppress his surprise, so he asked. Sir, I just got here for the first time and didn't know anything about the existence of the relic of light. Even if it really exists, why do you think that I can open it? When Blind Chen heard this, he just smiled. The inheritances from Ziwei the Great, Shinin the Great, and Xinjia the Great Emperor. Are there any relics in this world that my little friend cannot open? My friend has no reason to be so humble. How do you know? Futian looked doubtful as he glanced at Chen. However, Chen shook his head. I didn't say anything. Futian was more puzzled than ever. Blind Chen must have been in the Great Bright Domain all this time. If so, how could he possibly know what took place in the original realm? According to what he heard from those outsiders, Blind Chen had never even walked out of this house very often and rarely communicated with the others. How could he know what happened in the original realm? How do I know is not as important. What is important is that I have been waiting for you, my young friend, for more than 20 years. Blind Chen's words confused Futian even more. He had been waiting for him for more than 2 decades? Are you a prophet, sir? Futian asked. This seemed to be the only possibility. Could it be that Blind Chen was really capable of predicting the future as rumored? Not prophet so much. It's just because I can't see with my eyes that I perceive things more clearly than others and could see some things that ordinary people can't. Blind Chen continued, but Futian couldn't really understand that either. As for why I waited for you, my friend, it was not because I predicted anything, but because someone had asked me once to wait for you. However, when I saw you, I was more certain than ever that you, my friend, are indeed the one I have been waiting for. Blind Chen said. Who? Futian asked. All this seemed to have become even more mysterious. Someone had asked Blind Chen to wait for him? And it was more than 20 years ago. Who could it be? He didn't want to say, so I dare not disclose it. As long as you know that this is the case, that is sufficient for now. I believe that you will know who it is in the future, Blind Chen explained. Futian understood that Blind Chen wouldn't say anything more at this point. The accurate word he used was not that he didn't want to, but that he dared not to. Blind Chen was a mysterious and unpredictable figure, also known as Chen the Diviner. All 4 top principalities in the Great Bright City were a little apprehensive of him. However, he himself was convinced of a prophecy that someone else had told him more than 2 decades ago, and he dared not reveal that person's identity. Therefore, the identity of this other person was very intriguing. Just who was it that had exercised such great power over him? And what did it have to do with him? Could this involve the secret of his own birth? How do I unlock the secrets of the Temple of Light? Asked Futian. Previously, you went to the Portal of Light, and that is where the Temple of Light lies today. Blind Chen continued. What will happen after it's unlocked? Futian asked again. Chen will inherit the power of the light, Blind Chen said. Chen? Futian looked at Chen next to Blind Chen and saw Blind Chen nod. He continued. You must be familiar with Chen's abilities. As you know, he was born under the light, with the power of light flowing in his body, and he is destined to be the heir of the light. However, he needs your help now. Futian was more curious than ever as he glanced at Blind Chen and Chen. He asked, I have a question that I hope the elder can answer. Please go ahead, little friend. Blind Chen responded amicably enough. Did Chen and I meet by chance or by careful arrangement? Futian asked. Since he had been asked to help Chen, he felt he had the right to know everything. When Blind Chen heard Futian's question, the expression on his face became somber. Chen, too, was regarding Futian with some seriousness. Obviously, no one wanted to be used. Before, Futian had always thought their encounter was chance, and he had cherished it as such, treating him as a good friend. But if all this turned out to be a carefully arranged event, it would instill suspicion in his heart, as no one would be happy able being used as a tool by another. It was not a coincidence. Before Blind Chen had a chance to answer, Qin Yi already responded. Let me explain. Blind Chen interrupted Qin Yi and explained to Yi Futian. This still has something to do with the person I mentioned before. I can tell you that this matter was not arranged by me but orchestrated by someone else. As for Qin Yi, he doesn't really know much of anything. He was just following what I told him to do. As for the person behind the scenes, although I can't tell you who he is, I swear to you that he would never do anything to hurt you. How can you be so sure? Yi Futian asked. If he wanted you to die, it's easy enough for him to do, so there is no need to spend so much energy to set it up. Blind Chen gave him an irrefutable reason. Someone that he was afraid of, someone whom even Chen the diviner believed in must be some incredibly strong existence. And if such an existence had been keeping tabs on his every move in the dark, it must indeed be very easy to kill him if that were the goal. Ultimately, both parties had foreseen that he would come here. Very well. Yi Futian had a suspicion in his heart, so he didn't say anything more but simply agreed. Qin Yi was a friend of his and had saved him once. Since there were no other intentions, he had no reason to refuse. Thank you, my friend. Blind Chen got up and bowed to Yi Futian slightly, saying, After Qin Yi inherits the light, he will accompany you and assist you. I believe he can be a great help to you, my little friend. You are overly courteous, kind sir. Qin Yi and I are friends already, so there is no need to say those things. Yi Futian also got up and helped Blind Chen to sit down again. However, he knew very clearly now that someone had arranged all of this. He didn't expect that what seemed to be a coincidental encounter at the Donghua banquet in the Donghua domain was not a coincidence, after all. Qin Yi had been there because of him. In light of this new perspective, some of the things that happened later made a lot of sense now. But he still had one more question. What was Qin Yi's background, and what was his relationship with Blind Chen? Why would Blind Chen think that he would be the heir of the light? Chapter 24:15 Piety. Outside of the old mansion, the various cultivators all remained there. No one left. Their wills enveloped the old mansion. However, after the doors closed, a faint light enveloped the old mansion and cut off their wills, preventing them from spying on everything that was happening inside. Naturally, no one tried to forcefully break through this barrier. They all waited outside patiently. As expected, not long after, a powerful aura spread out. In an instant, a group of cultivators descended. They were cultivators from the Lin clan. Their leader was an elder who appeared extremely authoritative and sharp. There were two other elders beside him who also had terrifying auras. They were all old monsters of the Lin clan and seniors of Lin Kong, the clan head of the Lin clan. Patriarch Lin. When they saw the authoritative elder in the lead, many people in different locations greeted him with a bow. They clearly recognized the other party. This elder was the patriarch and the mastermind behind the scenes of the Lin clan. Patriarch Lin glanced around him. He then looked towards the old mansion. A terrifying aura emanated from his figure and enveloped the space. All the cultivators present could sense a majestic pressure and an extremely sharp will acting on them. All around the mansion, many cultivators felt an extreme pressure suffocating them. Blind Chen, isn't this too much? Asked Patriarch Lin in a loud voice. His voice contained a menacing wave of sound. It caused sound ripples to form in the air. Even the old mansion trembled and seemed as though it was about to collapse. These past few years, Patriarch Lin had been cultivating in seclusion, attempting to break through to the next plane. If it weren't for the events of today, Lin Kong would not have disturbed him. With a loud bang, the doors of the old mansion were immediately shattered. The light shroud that cut off the wills of the cultivators naturally also disappeared without a trace. The crowd looked inside past the doors. Then, a group of people emerged. Blind Chen still held on to his crutch. He looked at Patriarch Lin, who stood in midair, and said, I have warned your junior before. Since Lin clan hasn't been able to discipline your junior, she will naturally have to pay the price for what she has done. Lin clan has been rather courteous with you all these years, have we not? Patriarch Lin's voice was cold as his might enveloped everyone present. Yi Futian frowned when a terrifying aura pressed down on him and the others. The aura belonged to someone who was at a level higher than Renhuang. The cultivation plane of Patriarch Lin had exceeded the Renhuang plane. He was someone who had survived the first stage of the divine tribulation of the Great Path. Even though the Great Bright Domain was a weak domain, there were still many forces located here. The leading 4 major forces were all based in this region, forming a cluster of strong cultivators. The strongest existences were all cultivators who had survived the first stage of the divine tribulation of the Great Path. Of course, some mysterious cultivators could occasionally be spotted in the Great Bright Domain. They were foreign cultivators who came here to pry into the relic of the Bright Temple. However, all of them had found nothing, and they would soon leave the place. Only the cultivators of the 4 major forces stayed here permanently. Blind Chen did not respond to Patriarch Lin's question. Instead, he took a few steps forward and announced, "Haven't all of you been wanting to verify the prophecy? Now let us go to the Portal of Light." The eyes of the cultivators narrowed when they heard his words. A brilliant light flashed in their eyes. Did Blind Chen mean that the ruins of the Bright Temple would appear once again today? Many people couldn't help but take another look at Yi Futian. Blind Chen had been waiting for Yi Futian's arrival, and he welcomed him with light today. Now that Yi Futian was here, they were going to the Portal of Light immediately. What did this mean? Even Patriarch Lin was stunned. The might he unleashed actually lessened. Clearly, the relic of the Bright Temple was far more important to him than the life of a junior. No one showed signs of attacking anymore. When they saw Blind Chen striding forward, they followed him and moved towards the Portal of Light. The gazes of the cultivators of the Lin clan were as cold as ice when they stared at Blind Chen's back. However, since Patriarch Lin did not do anything, they suppressed their killing intent and followed behind him closely. Not long after, a group of people arrived at where the Portal of Light was. People would still occasionally come to this ruin. Many cultivators were observing this Portal of Light. They wanted to comprehend its mysteries. However, no one dared to enter inside. After all, in the past, all those who entered the Portal of Light ended up with tragic fates. Chen the Diviner has arrived. Many people recognized Blind Chen when they saw him. In Great Bright City, Blind Chen was still very famous. Rumor has it that his eyes were blinded after he entered the Portal of Light. They could not withstand the power of light in the portal. This caused him to lose his eyesight permanently. Now, why had Blind Chen brought the cultivators of Great Bright City here? Were they going to enter the Portal of Light again? Blind Chen's figure landed in the ruins. Chen Yi Futian and the others also landed. Behind them, the figures of the cultivators of the various forces remained floating in midair. They were waiting quietly behind them, awaiting Blind Chen to act. They were waiting to see how he was going to open the relic of the Bright Temple. The relic of light had not been opened for countless years. Was it going to open just because a mere youth had arrived here? Yi Futian himself did not understand. Blind Chen claimed that Yi Futian could unravel the mystery of the Bright Temple. However, there was just a portal of light here. What did Yi Futian have to work with? This portal of light also seemed very dangerous. Blind Chen faced the portal of light. His expression was stern. He had not been here for many years. Today, there was finally hope for the mystery of light to be unraveled. He bowed slightly towards the portal of light, and then prostrated himself on the ground, worshipping the portal. It was as though this was his religion, and he was displaying his unparalleled piety. When Yi Futian saw this scene, he revealed a strange look. Who was Blind Chen exactly? Why was he so pious towards the Bright Temple? Could it be that there existed a connection between Blind Chen and the temple? However, the Bright Temple was a top force in ancient times. Why would Blind Chen have a connection with it? Yi Futian had heard that Blind Chen had lived for many years. Even so, he could not possibly be a cultivator from ancient times who survived until the present day, right? If it were so, it would be inconceivable. The cultivators of the various major forces were also stunned. Only the senior figures had normal expressions. Nothing seemed strange to them. They had clearly seen Blind Chen acting this way before. Blind Chen uttered some strange sounds. The crowd did not understand what he had said. Blind Chen then got up and stood there facing the portal of light. He said, "More than 2 decades ago, I proclaimed that light would descend and the relic of the bright temple would reappear. Today is the day that the prophecy comes true. All of you wish to open the relic of the bright temple, right? Then, please enter the portal of light together." When they heard Blind Chen's words, the cultivators narrowed their gazes as they stared at his silhouette. Enter the portal of light? Everyone knew about the dangers of the portal. Was he asking them to seek their deaths by exploring inside? They obviously would not easily agree to do so. "Old diviner, you and your group should be the ones to lead the way," said Patriarch Lin in a cold tone. Chapter 24:16 Probing. None of the other cultivators moved. Clearly, none of them wanted to help the others get to the prize inadvertently. If the entry to the portal of light could be obtained so easily, they would have entered it already instead of waiting until now. Everyone knew about the danger that lay just beyond the portal of light in the City of Light. Inside this seemingly transparent portal of light, a small world seemed to exist with an entire universe of its own. Blind Chen was quietly perceiving all of this, and he now commented casually, "You all want to explore the relic of the light, but none of you are willing to sacrifice anything. Do you think that the relic of the Temple of Light will just appear in front of you as you stand here, waiting for you to inherit it? Many years ago, I tried to open the relic of the Temple of Light, but it was only possible from the inside. Now, the one who can open the portal of light that I've been waiting for all this time is here. Next, all of you will need to cooperate so that everyone can enter the Temple of Light together. To pave the way for our young friend to open the portal of light means that there will inevitably be some sacrifices. After the relics of the Temple of Light reappear in the world, whatever you can get from it will depend only on yourselves." Blind Chen's voice could be heard throughout the void, and everyone heard it loud and clear. However, no one responded to him as they just looked at Blind Chen without revealing much in their expressions. Of course, many of them were looking at Futian. The one who could open the portal of light? So, the cultivators from the 4 major principalities would enter the portal of light just to pave the way for him. Why should they? Why should they pin their hopes on a youngster? Who exactly is this person? It's hardly convincing just based on an old diviner's say-so, said the Lan clan's leader in an indifferent tone. Up until now, none of them had been able to figure out Futian's true identity. All they knew was that he came with Chen Yi to the City of Light. Perhaps it was Blind Chen who asked Chen Yi to search for him. You don't need to know so much about who our young friend is. But if anyone in this world can unlock the secret of the portal of light, then, under the great Emperor, I am afraid no one else except our friend here can get it done. Blind Chen continued nonchalantly. The likes of the great emperors were excluded, of course. They were imperial-level existences, which would make it much easier for them to open the relics of other great emperors, so they cannot be taken into consideration. Therefore, he said it had to be under the level of the great emperor. But even so, it was still mighty high praise coming from the blind man. Under the great emperor, was Futian the only one who could open the relic of light? I'm a little curious as to who he is, that the elder holds him in such a high esteem? Someone else asked lightly. The person who spoke was Yu Ho, the cultivator from the Yu family. He possessed powerful cultivation. He was a Renhuan of the 8th realm and the next clan leader of the Yu family. He had already begun to take over its control. He was one who had high hopes for himself, and was proud at heart. He did not address him as the old diviner, just as an elder. It seemed that he either respected nor believed in Blind Chen. Under the great emperor, only Futian could achieve it? And all of them had to cooperate with Futian? I am curious as well. To ask the cultivators of the 4 major principalities in the City of Light to cooperate with an outsider to open the portal of light, simply based on elders' say-so, is not really that meaningful, said 7 Night Star Lord of the 7 Stars Mansion. He was another genius whose cultivation level was equivalent to Yu Ho's. He was the head of 7 great Star Lords of the 7 Stars Mansion. What Blind Chin said just now was for them to enter the portal of light and pave the way for Yi Futian. The 4 top principalities in the City of Light paving the way for Yi Futian. Why? The cultivator from the Lin family, who was in conflict with Blind Chen and the others, asked coldly. Why should they? How could a cultivator from the outside deserve such special treatment? Why? Blind Chen repeated casually and said, although all of you are extraordinary individuals in the City of Light, standing at the very top, if I am to be honest, I'm afraid that none of you can outshine our little friend. Yi Futian revealed a strange look when he heard Blind Chen's words. It looked like Blind Chen was deliberately provoking cultivators from various forces. Did he mean to use him to bring these 4 major forces under control, so would they accept his command in the future? However, if Blind Chen had asked him to enter the portal of light by himself, he would have been rather reluctant to do so. Ultimately, though he had promised Blind Chen, he couldn't say he had implicit trust in him, and everyone knew that the portal of light was extremely dangerous. Ideally, it would be better if someone scouted out the way for him so he could determine the level of danger. Everyone fell silent after hearing what Blind Chen had to say. All the top characters from their City of Light were here, and Blind Chen was talking nonsense again. Were they really no comparison to this white-haired young man? Is that so? Yu-Ho said nonchalantly and without much emotion. I don't really believe it. How about the elder has improved himself by entering the portal of light, letting us see? Sounds good. Many cultivators echoed his sentiment, but each of them had their own scheme in mind. My young friend, I am afraid we will have to trouble you. Blind Chen spoke to Yi Futian via voice transmission, and Yi Futian immediately understood what he meant. It was probably just as he had speculated. Sure, Yi Futian replied with a single word. He then took a step forward and said, You can confirm it yourselves. If the elder were right, you would be the first to enter. If the elder is wrong, then I will enter the portal of light first. Upon hearing Yi Futian's words, everyone's eyes sharpened slightly. Yu-Ho and the others looked at Yi Futian keenly until someone said, How can we confirm it? Don't feel obligated. Yi Futian said casually, an invisible current flowing upon him. The aura of the Great Path effused from him, and the aura of Renhuang in the 8th realm also bloomed. But when they felt his aura, all these cultivators were slightly relieved. After all, it seemed that he was not all that amazing, he was just in the 8th realm. In that case I will do it, said a voice. In the void, Yu-Ho took a step forward, and countless eyes focused on him immediately. In the next moment, they saw an incredibly fervent sun appear behind Yu-Ho. The sun expanded rapidly, turning into a terrible vision that lay across the sky. An incomparable light began to shoot out from the vision. This divine light was not only the light of the flaming Great Path, it seemed to also contain the way of the light. In a moment, countless rays of light rained down, not just on Yi Futian's side, but they also snaked towards Blind Chen and the others. It was very obviously deliberate. But around Blind Chen and the others, an invisible power of light now shrouded them. It was Qin who had made a move as he released the power of the light. Yi Futian didn't move. He merely stood there and looked up. The divine light on Yu-Ho's body shone directly on his body, making a sizzling sound. This terrifying force of destruction seemed to want to drill into Yi Futian's body, but an incomparable divine light circulated upon his body, making it impossible for that destructive light to invade. What? Everyone frowned. How could this be? Although Yu-Ho didn't make a direct move, the power he released was considerable. It was, however, completely ignored by the others. It's far too weak, whispered Yi Futian, which made Yu-Ho's heart tremble. Then, he saw Yi Futian raise his head and look at him. Chapter 24:17 No Way to Fight Back. Yu-Ho's expression changed, just as the sun behind him was changing as well, turning into a huge solar pattern. In a brief moment, this vast area became fiery hot as the temperature rose sharply, about to incinerate the entire space. Psst! A piercing sizzling sound was heard, and a terrifying light of destruction shot out from the solar divine pattern, illuminating Yi Futian. In return, Futian simply raised his head to look at Yu-ho as he raised his hand and pointed towards the void. Buzz! A light from his finger directly penetrated the space and fell on that gigantic pattern. In an instant, the pattern was pierced, and fissures began to appear. Yu-ho let out a muffled groan. His face paled as he retreated rapidly higher into the sky. Between Futian and him, a sword light appeared to connect heaven and earth like a sword that had traversed the void. It was not until Futian pulled back his arm that Yu-ho finally breathed a sigh of relief. He looked at the figure below with great shock. How could he be so strong? As the same existence of Ren Huang in the 8th realm, he had considered his combat effectiveness quite worthy. He himself was an extremely well-known figure in the great bright city. Yu-ho was the most outstanding cultivator of the Yu family's younger generation. But he was defeated by a single finger. All the cultivators surrounding them were looking at Futian with altered perception. Qinyi had made a move before this. Lin Shi was obliterated just as the light was blooming. This was before the cultivators from the Lin family had time to render aid. At the time, everyone could see that Qinyi's strength was incredible. But Futian was the one Blind Chen felt compelled to welcome in person. Blind Chen's identity left a lot to the imagination, and his strength was a puzzle to them all. What they could have never imagined was Futian was so powerful that Yu-ho was defeated by a single finger, unable to put up much of a fight. If Futian stayed on the offensive, it was highly likely that Yu-ho would be slain. They didn't know that when Futian was yet a Ren Huang in the 7th realm, he had already defeated the Devil Emperor's direct disciple, who was in the 8th realm. Yu-ho may be a known figure in the great bright city, but compared to the direct disciple of the Devil Emperor or even the descendants of the great emperor from the ancient god clan, he was far from being on the same level. How could he even begin to dream of combating Futian, who was in the same realm as him? The strength of the two was not even close. Furthermore, during the chaotic times in the original realm, Futian was in retreat for more than a decade, focusing solely on his cultivation. His strength had far surpassed where he once was, and he was not on a level that Yu-ho could compare with. Among all the cultivators present, except for Futian and his own group, only Blind Chen was not surprised. Since he knew about Futian's deeds in the original realm, he was quite unsurprised by his combat effectiveness. Just as he had said, people like Yu-ho may be the enchanting existence of great bright city, but in front of Futian, they dimmed in comparison. Who are you really? Yu-ho stood in the void and questioned Futian while staring at him. Futian glanced at him without bothering to respond. Now that he had offended the imperial palace, there were still many forces in the divine prefecture that had not forgotten about him, even if Dongwang the Great had let him off the hook. Although there might not be much danger to speak of in the great bright domain, he was not eager to expose himself. After this business finished, he planned to leave for the Western world immediately. Who else would like to give it a try? Futian asked, looking at the cultivators from the 4 top forces in the void. Now that Yu-ho was repelled by a single blow, other cultivators in the 8th realm would hardly qualify as a challenge. For a time, no one moved a muscle. If no one else is interested in coming forward, then please enter the portal of light. Futian looked at the door in front of him and said, The 7 Stars Mansion would like to see your strength. The 7 Night Star Lord of the 7 Stars Mansion stepped forward. Several others followed right behind him. Everyone looked alarmed. Were these 7 powerful cultivators ready to raise their hands against Futian? Us 7 at the 7-Star Mansion are one and the same. Your cultivation is superb. Hope you don't mind, said the 7 Night Star Lord. Obviously, he realized that the power of one man was hardly enough to affect Futian in any meaningful way, so he wanted the 7 of them to try in a united effort to see what kind of character this Futian was. As you please. Futian stood there quietly. It seemed as if he didn't mind at all that he was up against a party of 7. The 7 Star Lords levitated into the air. In an instant, the firmament underwent a drastic change, and a starry sky world appeared above them, covering the entire area. The 7 Star Lords were stationed in different directions, forming a kind of a matrix. 7 stars moved as one coherent entity. When Futian saw this, he slowly levitated into the air as well, After a while, he was suspended in the void right underneath the 7 cultivators. Buzz! The 7 Star Lords of the 7 Stars Mansion possessed an astounding aura. The stars revolved as 7 stars gathered together. The 7th Star Lord raised his hand and slammed towards Futian. Suddenly, a dull rumbling sound came from the sky. Many stars had gathered and surrounded that giant palm. It blasted toward Futian at the same time. Futian raised his head as he took in the sight. His mind turned ever so slightly, and suddenly, a miniature version of the starry sky world appeared around him. The starry light screen surrounded him and closed, turning into a defense. The attack in the void blasted down, and a sudden dull rumbling was heard. However, it could not shake the light screen that was blocked in front of Futian. The expressions on the faces of the 7 Star Lords changed a bit. Their divine consciousness twitched slightly, and suddenly, even more stars appeared between heaven and earth. However, at this moment, Futian's mind turned again, and countless starlight spread outward as the will of the great path shrouded the boundless space. Soon, a great starry sky world appeared in this space, and the stars in the sky were shining brightly. They were suspended in the sky, surrounding the starry sky world formed by the 7 Star Lords. All the onlookers watched with great interest. This was the suppression of the Great Path domain, which directly overpowered the Great Path domain of another. The 7 Star Lords watched the stars revolving in the sky. The power emitted from the stars alerted them. The energy effused from the 7th Star Lord gradually diminished as he looked at Futian and said, "It seems that the old diviner was right, after all." They had indeed been outdone by Futian. In an instant, the starlight dissipated, and their auras retracted as well. Seeing this, Futian did the same. The 7 Star Lords took one last look at Futian, then stepped back, but not without some deep thoughts of their own. Indeed, there would always be some youngsters out there that could get the better of them. They had thought that their strength was second to none, but they never expected that someone could suppress them to this degree that they had no ability to fight back. There were many other cultivators from the great bright city around the relic. Many of them were in total shock when they saw what just transpired in front of them. They were now even more curious about Futian and everything about him. In front of him, these top figures from the great bright city looked like weaklings. Obviously, it was not because they were weak, but that Futian was far too strong. "I don't think there is any need for more tests," Blindchen said. "I've already said that he is the one who can open the relic of the Temple of Light, and so he is. All of you have been in the great bright city for many years, and if you, too, want to open the relic of the Temple of Light, then, please believe what I have said and assist our friend." Chapter 24:18 Entry. Everyone was silent. They had seen Futian's true strength, and it was indeed extraordinary. It seemed that what Blindchen had said could be true. However, entry to the Portal of Light had its own inherent risk. After all, there were many rumors about the Portal of Light. This was the only thing left from the glory days of the Temple of Light, thus shrouded in mystery. Among the people here, only Blindchen knew the Portal of Light the best. Furthermore, they couldn't fathom what Blindchen was thinking or what he would do. They were concerned about some unforeseen motives on his part, and that was why they hesitated. "If none of you want the relic of the Temple of Light to reappear, then just pretend I never said anything," Blindchen continued. "The person who can open it has been found, but your cooperation and assistance are requested. If you don't want to lend a hand, I will have to find some other way." Everyone remained silent when they heard Blindchen's words. Even Futian himself didn't quite understand what Blindchen had in mind or why he was so convinced that he could solve the secret held by the Portal of Light. Although he had unlocked many relics belonging to great emperors, was Blindchen's confidence in him based on the man behind the scenes? In other words, the one who arranged for Chen Yi to meet him and guide him to this place. "How many people do you need?" someone asked. It was the cultivator who had gotten into it with Blindchen earlier, Patriarch Lin. Not long ago, he was all hot and bothered about getting a piece of Blindchen, but now he was the first to speak, which was kind of surprising. True enough, in the face of their own interests, all grievances could be set aside for the time being. Of course, the more the better, the greater the chance. Blind Chen responded. Moreover, the stronger the cultivation, the better. There is no point to send those with weaker cultivation. Patriarch Lin pondered for a moment, and did not immediately answer him. The Lan family's clan leader also spoke up. What do you need us go in for? Until now, they had no inkling of Blind Chen's plan. He might not be telling them everything, but they had to ask, at the very least. To scope things out. Blind Chen's answer was short and simple. You all know that there is a spatial world hidden behind the portal of light. But exactly what is inside, even I have no clue. Someone needs to scout the way ahead for our young friend here so that he has the opportunity to open the relic. This is why your help is much needed. Blind Chen's straightforward answer convinced many. It could be that Blind Chen's really needed them to find the way inside the portal of light. How dangerous is it? Someone from the Yu family asked. How should I know? Blind Chen replied. I don't know that much about the portal of light either. I only know that the answer to opening this relic must lie beyond this portal of light, so I prophesied and strategized for this day. Today is the day that the light shall reappear. This is derived from my calculations. If my prediction is correct, then all of you will agree with me on this day anyway. Everyone couldn't help but reveal an odd look when they heard this, especially those from the Lin family. Those words sounded so familiar to them. It was not long ago since they heard the prediction made about Lin Shi. He had predicted that Lin Shi would face a catastrophe of death. But the premise was that Lin Shi would choose to raise her hand first, and indeed, Lin Shi had caused her own death. All things considered, they would agree to do this thing today, and did this mean that the long-awaited relic of the Temple of Light would be revealed once again in the world? You have all arrived. There's no need for you to continuing lurking in the dark, Patriarch Lin said loudly. Suddenly, in the distance, several powerful auras were detected from 3 major directions. Moments later, 3 powerful cultivators came out and walked over to them. They were the masters behind the other 3 top principalities. The Patriarch of the Lan family, the Patriarch of the Yu family, and the Chief of the 7 Stars Mansion. 3 cultivators who reigned above Renwang had descended. Their auras were terrifying, and their authority suppressed this corner of the sky. What do you think? Patriarch Lin asked as his eyes swept over the other 3. Since the old diviner has spoken, we have to help, Patriarch Yu said, and the others nodded in agreement. The Patriarch of Lan family looked at them and said, If this is the case, then let's first dispatch some cultivators from the family and have them assist the old diviner. Very well. As they reached a consensus, the cultivators from all the major forces returned to their bases to call on more cultivators. If the relic of the Temple of Light appears today, you will all be rewarded, Blind Chen said as he waited quietly. After some time, cultivators from those major forces arrived. Futian knew very well that those who were sent here were not key figures at the core of these major families, as they were being sent on a highly risky mission. Those major forces would be most reluctant to risk the lives of their most central figures. Even though Blind Chen had previously said that those with stronger cultivation were preferred, how could they abide by Blind Chen's words so easily? These cultivators were a little apprehensive at the moment. After all, they were supposed to enter the portal of light. However, the orders from their patriarchs were like orders from heaven, so even if they were reluctant, they had to obey. After waiting for some time, Blind Chen spoke again and asked, Is everyone ready? All set. Please tell us what you want us to do, old diviner, said Patriarch Lan. Very well. Blind Chen nodded and continued. I must remind you that it is completely fine if you don't want to go in. But once you are in, I cannot guarantee anything that might happen inside the portal of light. If something happens, don't blame me. When everyone heard the old man's words, they were a little uncertain again, but Yu-Ho spoke at this time. Patriarch, I will go in as well. In the previous battle with Futian, Yu-Ho was defeated by a single blow. Obviously, the wound was still fresh for him. Now the opportunity to enter the portal of light was upon them. He wanted to see if he could seize his fortune there. The Patriarch of the Yu family glanced at Yu-Ho, then nodded. As you wish. After that, the top figures from all major forces took the initiative to ask permission from their respective families, intending on gaining entry into the Portal of Light. Soon, the cultivators who were to enter the Portal of Light were confirmed. As all of them moved forward, Blindchen said, "Everyone may proceed directly inside. It's best to be prepared, however. Just proceed straight ahead." Afterward, he spoke to Futian via voice transmission. "After you enter the Portal of Light, you must rely on your own wit, my friend. Even I will not be much help, but I will go in with you." "I got it," Futian replied. "Let's go," Blindchen said in a low voice when he saw that the cultivators in front of them had already entered the Portal of Light. Futian looked ahead. He saw those who walked through the Portal of Light simply disappear. It was as if they had entered a mirror. It was truly amazing to behold. Behind this Portal of Light was an entire universe, mysterious and unpredictable. "Once you enter, watch yourself," Blindchen said. "I will do my best to protect you, my friend." Futian sobered up some. Blindchen's tone was serious, indicating that their mission this time was highly risky. More importantly, what Blindchen said seemed to suggest that his cultivation must be superior. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.